Hello. May we request everyone to settle down? We will now start the afternoon portion of our program. All right. I think we can now begin our afternoon session. We hope you all had a wonderful lunch. All right, so once again, good afternoon to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the diplomatic community, the academe, think tanks, the media, and also civil society. So once again, I am Joyce Reyes, and I am your host for this afternoon. And welcome again to the ninth year of the Arbitral Victory, defending the rules-based order through reinforced defense capabilities and partnerships. So I hope you had a sumptuous lunch, and as we have more engaging discussions to fill the rest of the day. But before we proceed to our esteemed speakers for this afternoon, we are fortunate to get a sneak peek into the award-winning documentary, as mentioned by Professor Manhit this morning, entitled Food Delivery, Fresh from the West Philippine Sea. Now, this documentary recently won the Tides of Change Award at the prestigious New Zealand International Documentary Film Festival, Doc Edge. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Now, this documentary was produced by Voyage Studios and directed by Baby Ruth Villarama. And we are very, very privileged because one of the producers is here with us today. Let us all welcome Mr. Chuck Gutierrez, the award-winning producer, and of course, the award-winning director, Miss Baby Ruth Villarama, is also with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. So this documentary follows the rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea, where Filipino fishermen, Coast Guard, and Navy personnel risk their lives to defend our waters. It features Filipino fisherfolk's harrowing encounter with the China Coast Guard, capturing rare frontline access, quiet heroism, and a powerful alliance in the fight for sovereignty. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all watch the preview in our LED screen.
Standby na, standby, standby.
All right, that was very interesting, and we definitely want to see more of that. I think at this point, we will be hearing from the director of the documentary. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Director Baby Ruth Villarama. All right.
My God, we're usually just happy doing our work behind the scene, but because of what's been happening, here I am. Good afternoon to all of you, our esteemed ambassadors, members of the armed forces, educators, lawmakers, and defenders of the nation. It is an honor for me to be here with you today. 9 years ago, the arbitral ruling affirmed what we Filipinos have always known, not just in law, but in our hearts. The West Philippine Sea is ours. As storytellers, we did not begin this journey with answers. We began with questions. Why do fishermen keep returning to these contested waters? What drives our Coast Guard and soldiers to stay calm under pressure? And what goes through their minds as they prepare to deliver food for a mission? In making food delivery film, we found the answer. Because for them, the sea is not just a geopolitical issue. It is not a headline, it is home. And home is always worth defending. On June 30, our film had its world premiere in New Zealand. It was met with tears, applause, and many questions. But not everyone welcomed the story. The Chinese consulate immediately tried to block the screening. They sent formal letters, they lobbied for its cancellation. But the festival thankfully said no. They stood for the film and for the truth. That moment reminded us that the fight for the West Philippine Sea isn't only fought on the water, it's also fought through education, braver principled diplomacy, and storytelling. So to all of you here, thank you for the work that you're already doing. This film is a timestamp of all your contributions. But we ask for your help once more. Help us bring food delivery to more cinemas, to classrooms, to communities, to policy spaces. Because if our people cannot fish freely, if their stories are not told, even our most historic victories can be forgotten. But if we continue to speak, to scream, and to stand together, no pressure, no propaganda, no foreign power can erase what is rightfully ours. And we're proud to announce today that food delivery will finally have its Philippine premiere on July 27, 7 p.m. at Cinema 7, Rockwell Power Plant Cinema. It's just a one-night only screening. We don't know if it will happen again. and we don't know if similar external pressures will resurface. But we know this: the story has to come home. And we invite you, not just as officials, not just as leaders, but as people who believe in the quiet power of standing your ground. Because this isn't just a Filipino story. It is a story of every small nation daring to be heard, of every teacher who still chooses to teach history, of every diplomat who chooses principle over pressure, of every soldier who guards the invisible lines of peace, and yes, of every storyteller who refuses to stay silent. Thank you, and may the waves carry our courage farther than fear ever could. Mabuhay po kayong lahat at mabuhay ang tunay na malayang Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Direk Baby Ruth Villarama, and also to the executive producer, Mr. Chuck Gutierrez. Once again, let's give them another round of applause, please. All right. Oh, before we proceed to our next part, let's have a quick photo opportunity. May we invite again Direk Baby Ruth and Mr. Gutierrez, please, to have a quick photo opportunity with Strat-Based Institute President, Professor Manhit. So we in Strat-Base, we do a lot of these conferences primarily to educate, to spread awareness, for information dissemination. And I believe that this documentary is really one of the best way to spread information and awareness about what's happening in this part of our country. And I hope that we can all support this very good endeavor that Ms. Baby Ruth and Mr. Chuck have started. So once again, congratulations and thank you for joining us this afternoon. All right. At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce a special speaker for this afternoon. We are honored to be joined by the United States Pacific Fleet, one of the major component commands of the U.S. Navy responsible for naval operations across the Indo-Pacific region and recognized as the world's largest fleet command. To share his insights with us today, please welcome the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Stephen Kaler. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. How is everybody doing today after lunch? I have the opportunity to address you with a full stomach, but thank you very much for the opportunity today, specifically to Strat-Base writ large. Thank you, Professor Monette. Thank you so much for inviting me and have this opportunity to share my perspective as the U.S. Pacific Fleet Commander. Truly honored, as I've had this opportunity to meet some of you, to be part of this distinguished group. So on behalf of the Pacific Fleet, it's an honor to be here. And I thought, what a great opportunity to talk to you a little bit as we celebrate this milestone anniversary of the arbitral ruling. I thought I would share just two major trends that I see in the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea. First, there's a growing recognition that what happens in the West Philippine Sea is part of a larger regional picture. We can see that China's unlawful claims to control over the entire South China Sea are linked to its broader push for hegemony in the region. Just as China has increased its deployments and aggressive tactics in the West Philippine Sea, it has intensified its rehearsals for invasion and blockade of Taiwan. For the US Pacific Fleet, our mission is to deter aggression across the Indo-Pacific, together with our allies and partners, and to prevail in combat if necessary. That mission of deterrence applies region-wide, including the West Philippine Sea and Taiwan. A conflict or crisis in either place would endanger the interest of countries across the region who rely on the flow of maritime commerce and put their prosperity at risk. Second, deterrence, despite its challenges, in my opinion, is holding the line in the West Philippine Sea. In the last several years, China has deployed a growing number of vessels to harass and coerce Southeast Asian states in their own waters. It has used artificial island bases it has built as springboards for those actions. China's tactics have also grown steadily and more aggressive, with rammings, water cannons, lasers, and sometimes worse. A year ago, we saw that violence on video at the Second Thomas Shoal, where China Coast Guard used axes and blades to injure a Philippine sailor conducting resupply. But despite these bully tactics, it's clear at this 9th anniversary of this arbitral ruling that China has failed to intimidate Southeast Asian claimants into surrendering their sovereign rights. In fact, we've seen a laudable resilience and resolve to defend their maritime rights in the face of mounting pressure. Nearly all Southeast Asian littoral states are now prioritizing stronger maritime capabilities. Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam have all sustained or expanded their offshore oil and gas work in their South China Sea EEZs. Perhaps the most compelling example, however, is in the Philippines, which has shown in the face of heavy pressure, firm and strong defending of your sovereign rights with dignity and strength. It continues to sustain its garrison of brave Marines at Second Thomas Shoal, as an example. The AFP and the Philippine Coast Guard are modernizing their capabilities and deploying proactively to defend their maritime rights. By shining a media light on China's intimidation tactics at sea, the Philippines has shown public exposure can be a vital tool to blunt coercion. Its expansion of defense partners has also bolstered defenses. From expanding reciprocal access agreements to inviting a growing range of maritime partners for cooperative patrols and exercises in the West Philippine Sea. The US Navy is proud to be among those partners. Supplementing this Southeast Asian resilience, the actions of the United States, I would argue, have had a real deterrent effect as well. The US and the US Pacific Fleet, in particular, happens to be biased, but in particular, is privileged to be a friend, partner, or ally with nearly every nation bordering the South China Sea. For our Department of Defense and our Navy, the Indo-Pacific is the priority theater. That is reflected in the strength of our Pacific Fleet. Over 200 ships, 1,300 aircraft, and 150,000 personnel. That's about 60% of the US Navy and includes our most advanced capabilities. On any given day, around 1/3 of our units are deployed. Another 1/3 are combat ready. Today, there are 3 Pacific Fleet carrier strike groups deployed, with more preparing for deployment as we speak. The USS George Washington Carrier Strike Group just patrolled the Philippine Sea and finished its visit to Manila. The USS America Amphibious Readiness Group, which based in Japan, is near Australia right now for the major exercise Talisman Sabre. On top of that, we have numerous forward deployed destroyers, littoral combat ships, submarines, and aircraft that continue to patrol the region. In addition, this strong contribution of allies and partners, many which are represented here today, has had a powerful cumulative effect on strengthening deterrence. While China has ignored the arbitral ruling, The rest of the world has not. The ruling's rejection of China's claim and its endorsement of the Philippines' EEZ has become the widely accepted view. It is explicitly endorsed by a growing number of states, especially those who consistently champion freedom of the seas. One of the clearest signs of ally and partner solidarity is the robust series of maritime joint combined exercises across the region. Those include Balikatan, right here in the Philippines. With credit to our Philippine hosts, Balikatan 2025 was the largest ever, with forces from the Philippines, United States, Australia, Japan for the first time, and 16 other nations observing. Multilateral exercises like Balikatan are a reminder that deterrence is a team sport. We are all in need to do our part, and we must continue to build deterrence for the challenges ahead. So what can we expect in the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea in this coming year? First, we can expect China to continue to try to divide and pressurize the Philippines and other Southeast Asian countries over the South China Sea. This may come in various forms. It could be behind-the-scenes coercion to stay silent when China's ships harass oil and gas or fisheries in other countries' EEZs. It could mean China offering inducements to buy silence or to look the other way as their Coast Guard or maritime militia assert their control. It might mean sweet words such as, "Let's jointly develop your resources," that are actually an invitation to arrangements that risk implicit recognition of Beijing's ownership. Claimant states would be wise to compare notes and stay vigilant to these tactics. That will help preserve unfettered access to their sovereign rights and jurisdictions over resources in their EEZs. Second, I think we need to continue or improve our collective ability to deter aggression. We should continue to train and exercise together in meaningful ways. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is always ready to work with you to strengthen deterrence and show no individual country can be pushed around. As the Secretary of Defense said most recently at the Shangri-La Dialogue, no one should doubt America's commitment to the Indo-Pacific, allies, and its partners. For proof of that commitment, look no further than the ironclad alliance between the Philippines and the United States. The Philippines is America's oldest security treaty ally in the Indo-Pacific since 1951, and our alliance grows stronger than ever. Today, we operate with our Philippine allies as equals. Our alliance has gained dramatic momentum and evolved significantly in the last few years. Together, we are increasing infrastructure investments at agreed sites in the Philippines to support combined training, exercises, interoperability, and disaster response. We're bringing advanced capabilities and training to the Philippines and deepening our collaboration on defense industry and cyber defense, as announced most recently by Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Teodoro in March. This momentum in our alliance is hugely encouraging, and the cause is enduring. That cause is freedom. Freedom to safeguard national sovereignty and pursue your people's prosperity without coercion or threat of force. Earlier today, I paid my respects at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at the National Heroes Cemetery. It stands not far from the Manila American Cemetery, where many Americans fallen are laid to rest. It reminded me not only of the shared sacrifice of allies, but of how vital it is to show our resolve to uphold your rights, whether your nation is large or small. For my part, and our part in the U.S. Pacific Fleet, we will continue to stand with the Philippines and our other allies to uphold sovereignty and the freedoms we all hold dear. I truly appreciate and thank everyone for allowing me to be here today, express a couple of my views, and I think this time together has been very important. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. I'm requesting the Admiral to stay on stage for a quick photo opportunity with Strat-Base President Professor Manhit and Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, another round of applause, please, for Admiral Stephen Kaler. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, sir, and thank you very much for that very insightful and inspiring speech. And at this point, we will now proceed to our first panel for this afternoon, which will look into strengthening the Philippines' defense posture. We will explore the strategic imperatives of enhancing the Philippines' defense capabilities amid evolving regional security dynamics. This panel will highlight the urgency of adopting a comprehensive, multi-domain external defense strategy from maritime to air to effectively asserting and safeguarding our sovereign rights. And to begin this afternoon's discussion, we are joined by the spokesperson of the Armed Forces of the Philippines to share with us how joint military exercises enhance interoperability. Let us give a warm round of applause for Colonel Francel Margaret Taborlupa.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. It's very difficult to open the floor for an after lunch talk. But let me begin. The West Philippine Sea is no longer a matter of debate. The 2016 arbitral ruling made it clear this is Philippine territory, and no amount of intimidation can erase that truth. 9 years ago, the ruling came down, and the world saw lines drawn across a map. But for those of us in uniform, it was never just about coordinates. It was a call, a commitment, a contract with every Filipino. You will never be left undefended. Since then, we've watched the tides shift, not just in water, but in posture, in tone, and in intent. So, this isn't a celebration. This is a report from the trenches, from the radars, from the cockpits, the forward bases, where the men and women of the Armed Forces of the Philippines have stood watch and stood ready. Not too long ago, most of our fights were in the shadows, internal threats, insurgencies. But the threatscape has changed, and so did we. Today, our units don't just track movements in the mountains, they monitor incursions in the open sea. Our operators now defend not just visible ground, but digital terrain as well. And the quiet hum of a drone has become just as familiar as the roar of a helicopter. This isn't theory, this is a necessity. We didn't merely pivot, we transformed, because the next threat won't send a warning, and we intend to meet it standing up, not catching up. Proactive rather than reactive. When we speak of the Indo-Pacific, we speak of a single theater. What unfolds in the East China Sea doesn't stay there. It rolls south, sometimes even literally. Into our waters, our airspace, our stability. That's why we have embraced the one theater concept, one interconnected sea, one shared reality. one line of preparation that stretches across the arch of alliances and geography. We no longer train for isolated events. We prepare for a chain reaction. And we are strengthening every single link. Because when the first ripple hits, we won't be scrambling. We'll already be in position. For effectivity and synchronization internally and effectively defending independently. We hold exercise Dagit Pa, Dagat, Langit at Lupa. It's sea, air, and land. We grow the habit of joint operations. We've turned interoperability into instinct. The Navy's maneuvers cue the Air Force Overwatch. The Army's advances with digital recon overhead. Signal, cyber, and logistics moving like one body, one mind, and this is no longer an exception. It is our operating rhythm now. Because in tomorrow's battle space, solo effort is a liability. But joint force, that's our signature strength. We don't modernize for prestige. We modernize because the world does not wait for the unready. Today, we fly aircraft with longer legs and sharper eyes. We sail ships that can see farther and strike faster. Our cyber teams guard invisible borders with the same intensity as our sentries on the ground. We still have a long way to go, but we are getting there. To be able to respond decisively, proportionally, and credibly. Modernization is not a shopping list. It is an answer to the question, are we ready if things go wrong? Our answer is clearer every day. We don't partner to depend. We partner to defend, more capably and independently. The United States has made its ironclad commitment clear, but that commitment is not to do the job for us. It is to ensure that we are equipped, trained, and connected enough to do the job ourselves. Our VFA remains a long-standing commitment we hold, and our Balikatan exercises remains the biggest and the most profound within this year, being a full battle test. Likewise, Australia has stepped up consistently and meaningfully through exercise Alon, Salaknib, and our bilateral amphibious drills and trilateral engagement is a crucial part of our growing web of credible defense partnerships. But the fabric of cooperation doesn't stop there. With Japan, our reciprocal access agreement allows deeper joint operability and operational activities, a sign of mutual trust and growing regional convergence. With New Zealand and Canada, we are developing visiting forces type frameworks, a SOVFA, that paves the way for shared exercises, training, and response capabilities. On deck are the UK and France with similar engagements, and we are looking at many more. These partnerships with like-minded and well-meaning nations are anchored in a common vision, a free, open, and rules-based Indo-Pacific where smaller nations are not bullied and sovereignty is not subject to size. We are not merely standing and banding together. We are standing for something greater, stability, freedom, and the rule of law. These alliances don't dilute our independence. They enable it. These aren't temporary ties. These are force multipliers, and in times of pressure, they will hold because we have forged them in readiness and not rhetorics. Threats don't always come wearing uniforms or flying flags anymore. They come through code, through coordinated distortion, through systems designed to confuse, overwhelm, or divide. That is why our defense architecture now extends into cyber and the cognitive domain. Through the Transparency Initiative, together with our other partners, of course, greatly heightened by our JT Tariela, uh, we have exposed what others would obscure, showing the facts as they happen, not when they are convenient. Disinformation is a weapon, but in our hands, it is so is the truth. 74 years ago, at the Battle of Yultong, 10,000 Filipinos held the line against 40,000 Chinese troops in a frozen foreign land. They were cold, outnumbered, outgunned, but they didn't fold. Less than 1,000 stood their ground against 40,000 enemies. No backup, no spotlight, just grit. What they showed the world wasn't just bravery. The climate was brutal, the odds were impossible, but retreat was not an option. It was a message. We Filipinos do not run. We fought with heart and we won. In effect, General Douglas MacArthur, moved by it, the courage and famously declared, "Give me 10,000 Filipino soldiers and I will conquer the world." That fire, that defiant resolve, still burns in our ranks today, in every sailor and marine who patrols despite intimidation, in every pilot who flies into the skies, and in every cyber operator who defends invisible borders. This is not nostalgia, it is continuity. The bloodline of Yultong runs through every mission we carry today. Yultong isn't over. It continues in posture, in purpose, and in pride. We are not a nation that chooses conflict, but we are a nation that will not be unprepared. We do not escalate, but neither do we hesitate to uphold our laws and protect our people. The Armed Forces of the Philippines stands as a pillar of peace, anchored in strength, professionalism, and unwavering commitment in constitutional duty. And in an uncertain world, readiness is the highest form of responsibility. We carry the legacy of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and with this, I close from Desiderata. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. The Armed Forces of the Philippines is here to protect the people, secure the state, and its sovereignty by being one AFP, one Philippines, building a strong AFP for a strong Philippines. And our joint efforts with like-minded nations and well-meaning nations, ably represented by everyone in the room right now, in this momentous day, we are all enablers to uphold our seas, our rights, and our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very inspiring speech, ma'am. All right. Our next discussion will put the modernization of the Philippine Navy in the spotlight in a bid to achieve credible deterrence. For this important topic, we will be joined by the spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea and Inspector General of the Philippine Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad.
Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me first to acknowledge Professor Dindo Manhit and your entire Strat-based team, Excellencies, Ma'am Carlson, senior officers, Justice Scarpio, friends, ladies and gentlemen, my wife, by the way, Christy, the first time that she has seen me speak here at Strat-base. For the next few minutes, allow me to share with you my thoughts on modernizing the Philippine Navy for credible deterrence. The contents of this brief are mine. Any similarity with ongoing DND or GHU modernization efforts of the Philippine Navy are merely coincidental. the strategic context, much has been said about this. International law is being put to the test, and the laboratory is the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea. Depending on the results of the test in this laboratory, will impact into other maritime domains in North America, in Europe, and in other parts around the world. Our nation is a maritime nation, archipelagic country. We depend on the seas as our lifeblood for trade, for commerce, for prosperity. The security of our seas is crucial in our national defense posture. When the current administration came into power in 2022, I did not expect personally that there would be a policy statement that would shift the orientation of the armed forces from internal security to external defense. When the Commander-in-Chief mentioned not 1 square inch during his 2022 State of Nation address, it was followed up in 2023, January, when during his visit to the Visayas Command, he mentioned, the armed forces will now have a new mission. We will be shifting from internal security orientation towards external defense. This was further amplified by the Secretary of National Defense in 2024, February, when he mentioned during his visit to the Batanes Group of Islands that the armed forces will be implementing a comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. From there, we have seen the armed forces take on the bigger role of defense and security, which is oriented outwards, and playing a supporting role to other law enforcement partners when it comes to the internal security picture. Rehorizon 3 of the modernization program has numerous capabilities for the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and Joint Headquarters. This covers a broad range of capabilities, but modernization is more than just capabilities. It is first and foremost the will of the people, the national leadership, military capability, and partners and allies. Part of this for the Philippine Navy is looking at how will we be structured to be able to implement the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Our defense posture is to show that the Philippines is like a porcupine that adopts aposematism, or showing any potential adversary, I am small, I'm slow, I don't have much meat. You could easily kill me for food, but will I be worth the cost? The same approach has driven the Philippine Navy to develop its capability within the bounds of the Constitution that we despise war as an instrument of national policy, but we are prepared to secure and defend all the way up to the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, and even the extended continental shelf. Developments across the capabilities of maritime domain awareness, maritime strike, cross-domain fighting, asymmetric warfare, and support and sustainment have now been deliberated upon and submitted to higher headquarters for consideration and subsequent approval. Central to this is ensuring that our choke points that provide access from the South China Sea to the bigger Pacific expanse will be within the control of the Philippines, and that we would be interoperable with our partners and allies. For 2023, we have had 3 MCAs, Maritime Cooperative Activities. 2024, we had 10. This year, within 6 months, we have had 10, with more coming. And I'm glad to say that your Philippine Navy has been able to plug and play with modern navies, some of which are represented here in this room. The choke points are critical when it comes to the defense and security of the country. They are considered as the maritime mobility corridors, providing east to west passage and vice versa. They are critical to national defense and a contributor to regional peace and stability. Likewise, as mentioned by the Secretary of National Defense about a one theater concept, our current unified command system is looking at defense and security from the perspective of the land. The one theater concept would give us a broader battle space, looking at defense and security from the perspective of the maritime domain. This would allow us to simplify the chain of command and the allocation of resources. The same concept also is being applied by the Philippine Air Force because the air up there knows no boundaries. This concept has been already in the Philippine Navy's active archipelago defense strategy of 2012. In closing, allow me to say that a stronger Philippine Navy will protect our territory, defend our sovereignty, and sovereign rights. It will allow us access to our maritime entitlements, which every Filipino has the right to. It will contribute to national development, serve as a strong deterrent to any potential adversary, and contribute to regional peace and stability. Maraming salamat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Admiral Roy Trinidad. Our next speaker will tackle how the AFP's Aerial Warfare Service Branch is creating an integrated air and missile defense against various aerial threats. May we now call on the commander of the Philippine Air Force's Air Defense Command, Major General Fabian Pedregosa. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Your Excellencies, distinguished visitors, members of the government, members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard, representatives of civil society, esteemed colleagues from the media, members of the academe, to Professor Dindo Manhit and the whole Strat-based family, and my fellow Filipinos. Good afternoon. Today, we mark the 9th anniversary of the landmark Arbitral Award on the South China Sea, a milestone that continues to affirm not just our maritime entitlements, but the primacy of international law over unilateral and no-basis assertion. In 2016, the Philippines stood before the world and asked, can a small nation seek justice through the law, and will the world listen? The answer rendered by the Permanent Court of Arbitration was a resounding yes. The ruling declared China's expansive 9-line claim to have no legal basis. It affirmed our exclusive sovereign rights over vast portions of the West Philippine Sea, including rich marine resources and undersea energy reserves. But while the ruling is legally binding and internationally recognized, enforcement remains elusive. Aggressive actions continue, coercive, unlawful, and destabilizing. Our fishermen are obstructed in our traditional fishing grounds. Maritime features within our exclusive economic zone are militarized, and our patrol vessels and aircraft are routinely challenged, even as we exercise lawful activities within our own waters. This is why we gather today, not only to commemorate a legal victory, but to articulate the growing national effort to turn the ruling into tangible national security. At the heart of this effort is a clear and sustained push to modernize the armed forces of the Philippines, now entering Horizon 3 of its modernization program. Horizon 3 marks a decisive shift from internal security to external defense. Our goals are ambitious but necessary to build a defense posture that is credible, resilient, and responsive to emerging threats. A centerpiece of this transition is the development of a credible, integrated air and missile defense system, or IAMD. Such a system is vital not only for protecting our sovereignty, but for defending critical infrastructures, projecting deterrence, and ensuring the survivability of our forces. IAMD is the shield that safeguards our skies and strengthens our diplomacy. The recent global conflicts we have seen today reinforce the urgency of our modernization. In Ukraine, we've seen the high cost of delayed defense investments. The war has demonstrated the importance of dispersed, mobile, and network air defenses. Even the most powerful aggressors can be blunted by asymmetric tactics, real-time intelligence, and resilient command structures. In the Israel-Iran missile and drone confrontation, we witnessed how layered missile defenses were vital in intercepting hundreds of simultaneous attacks. But even Israel, a country with decades of experience in missile defense, was stretched to its limits. The lesson is clear. Preparation and integration are essential in deterring and surviving saturation attacks. From the India-Pakistan air skirmishes, we observe how quickly tensions can escalate, especially in the air domain. The incident highlighted the critical role of early warning systems, secure communications, and airspace control in preventing miscalculations. The thread running through all these examples is unmistakable. Modern defense is multi-domain, technology-driven, and time-sensitive, and we need to invest now. However, emerging threats are not always large or loud. The Philippines must also develop counter-unmanned aerial systems to defend against low-cost, high-impact drones capable of targeting radar stations, disabling logistics, or carrying out surveillance. You must also build a layered counter-missile capabilities to detect and neutralize cruise or ballistic missile threats in real time. Defense today means building systems that talk to each other, that can share data instantly, and that enable rapid, decisive actions across all services. Our air defense must no longer operate in isolation. It must be integrated, interoperable, and intelligent. This is why the Philippines is shifting toward network-centric warfare, where every sensor, shooter, and commander is part of a real-time operational picture. The future of warfare is not just about superior firepower. It is about faster decision-making, seamless communication, and shared battle space awareness. Further, interoperability is not just a technical issue. It is a strategic necessity. Our security partnership, including with the United States, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and other like-minded nations, are grounded in shared values and interoperable capabilities. Joint patrols, maritime exercises, and data sharing protocols ensure we are not alone in defending our principles. We must also look upward. Space is the new high ground. Satellites now enable our navigation, targeting, surveillance, and communications. A disruption in space can paralyze entire defense networks. The Philippines must build capacity for space situational awareness, pursue civil-military satellite partnership, and actively engage in regional efforts to keep space peaceful, transparent, and secure. Ultimately, national defense is not only the duty of soldiers, sailors, marines, and airmen. It is the responsibility of every sector. Diplomacy must reinforce our deterrence, media must communicate the truth, think tanks must challenge our assumptions, and the public must remain engaged, vigilant, and united. We must stand as one nation with one message. The Philippines is prepared to defend what is lawfully ours through peaceful means, firm resolve, and credible capability. Your Excellencies, colleagues, fellow Filipinos, the Arbitral Award of 2016 was not the end of our struggle. It was the foundation for a more secure and sovereign future. Let us build on that foundation, not just with words, but with strategic investments, institutional reforms, and a shared national will. To our diplomats, stay the course. To us in the military, let's modernize with purpose. To our partners, stand with us. To our people, believe in and fight for our sovereignty and support our modernization program. For sovereignty is not merely claimed, it is defended, secured, and sustained. Mabuhay po ang bansang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang ating sadatang lakas. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you very much, General Fabi Pedregosa. Next, to share how the Philippine Coast Guard is boosting its capabilities to protect Philippine waters, we have with us the spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea of the Philippine Coast Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Commodore J. Tariela.
To Your Excellency Mary Kay Carlson, Professor Dean Dumanhit, Justice Antonio Carpio, my fellow patriots and brave Filipinos celebrating the 9th anniversary of the Arbitral Award, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, a pleasant afternoon to everyone. Before I start, I would like to seek for your indulgence because I was not able to coordinate with the AFP personnel in coming up with their presentation slides. So I just have pure text and manuscript for my speech. It is with great honor and profound pleasure that I stand before you as we come together to celebrate the 9th anniversary of the Arbitral Award. I would like to begin by expressing my heartfelt appreciation to the Strat-Based Institute for organizing this momentous occasion, which serves as a platform for us to reflect on and commemorate this significant milestone in our nation's history. As we gather in this esteemed activity, it is necessary for us to acknowledge the remarkable efforts of the Philippine Coast Guard in enhancing its capabilities to protect and secure our maritime jurisdiction. However, I think it is essential for us to clarify the scope of the Coast Guard's responsibilities. It is vital for us to understand that the Philippine Coast Guard is not positioned to take the lead in addressing external threats to our sovereignty. Rather, this critical role firmly resides with the Philippine Navy as an integral component of the armed forces of the Philippines. I have reiterated this point in numerous occasions and in past discussions, and I wish to underscore it once more today. The Philippine Navy will always remain to have the constitutional mandate to defend our maritime jurisdiction. To initiate our discourse, we must clearly delineate the role of the Philippine Coast Guard in the context of safeguarding Philippine waters. Our primary focus is centered around constabulary duties, particularly within the framework of maritime governance. When we speak of maritime governance, we are referring to the essential task of ensuring safety at sea, protecting the marine environment, and enforcing myriad of maritime laws that govern our waters. With this foundational understanding in place, it becomes clear that our efforts in capability building and modernization must not be narrowly focused solely on the presence in the West Philippine Sea. While that particular aspect is undoubtedly of great significance, we must also devote considerable attention to other equally vital mandates such as maritime safety and marine environmental protection. The evolution of the Philippine Coast Guard capabilities has been an ongoing journey since 2013, when then President Noynoy Aquino sought the support of the Japanese government to fund the acquisition of the 10 44-meter multi-role response vessels, followed by the two additional 97-meter vessels. All of these newly constructed ships were delivered during the presidency of President Rodrigo Duterte. Among the assets that were initiated by President Noynoy Aquino and subsequently received during his successor's term are the four 24-meter fast patrol boats and the Coast Guard's first 83-meter offshore patrol vessel, which was financed by the French government. Furthermore, during the Duterte administration, the Coast Guard has successfully acquired two Airbus H-145 helicopters and a Cessna Grand Caravan multipurpose single-engine aircraft to bolster our operational capabilities. At present, these Coast Guard limited assets are actively deployed across various regions of the Philippine archipelago, undertaking critical missions that include search and rescue operations, oil spill prevention, and sovereignty patrols, among other essential tasks. It is evident that our current assets, both aerial and maritime, are insufficient to adequately sustain our efforts in fulfilling our mandates that span the length of our nation's coastline from Batanes to Tawi-Tawi. However, it is crucial to note that our challenges regarding equipment, particularly in our coastal communities, are somewhat alleviated by the professionalism and technical competencies of our personnel. The significant contribution of the former president in facilitating a rapid increase in the workforce back in 2016 must be recognized. At that time, the Coast Guard was only staffed by a meager 8,990 personnel. Thanks to the Coast Guard recruitment plan that I personally wrote way back in 2017, we were able to effectively justify the necessity for a substantial increase, aiming for a personnel to kilometer ratio. Given that our coastline measures an impressive total of 37,869, the Philippine Coast Guard then faces a staggering deficit of nearly 28,000. At present, I am proud to announce that the Coast Guard now has a personnel strength of more than 35,000 strong. Our personnel have undergone rigorous development through regular training sessions at the U.S. Coast Guard facilities in the United States, as well as through training programs sponsored by JICA with the Japanese Coast Guard. Despite the fiscal challenges, the current leadership of the Philippine Coast Guard under Admiral Ronnie Hill Gavan remains committed to enhancing our assets. This endeavor is strongly supported by the Chief Executive and both houses of Congress, who have shown their backing for our modernization efforts for the Coast Guard. Currently, in the pipeline is the acquisition of 5 additional 97-meter vessels from Japan, alongside the procurement of 40 35-meter multipurpose fast response boats with support from France. Of these, 20 will be constructed in France, while the remaining 20 will be built right here in the Philippines. The primary goal is to facilitate technology transfer and ultimately bolster our local shipbuilding industry. In terms of our government funding, the Philippine Coast Guard has also set ambitious plans aimed at significantly enhancing our operational capabilities. One of the key initiatives is the acquisition of several 60-meter class multi-role response vessels, which are designed to provide versatile support for our various maritime missions. In addition to these vessels, we're also planning to procure 2 medium endurance helicopters and 2 trainer helicopters, which will greatly enhance the aerial surveillance, and operational readiness. This year, we have also programmed the establishment of a sophisticated satellite data communication system. This system is intended to be installed at Coast Guard shore stations and on at least 12 of our Coast Guard vessels. Furthermore, in terms of weapon system, the Coast Guard has scheduled the installation of a 30-millimeter remote-controlled stabilized naval gun system on our 97-meter vessels. This installation is a significant step forward as it will provide our vessels with enhanced firepower to ensure a robust maritime presence. Lastly, I firmly believe that among all the capability development initiatives currently being championed by our leadership, the enhancement of port facilities stand out as the most critical. In the next coming years, we anticipate that our fleet will expand by over 200%, which presents a significant challenge. We currently lack sufficient berthing space for our vessels. This situation can be likened of having numerous cars without any available parking spaces. However, it is essential to recognize that these acquisitions should not be viewed as merely ordinary vehicles. Given that our budgetary constraints, we consider these vessels to be comparable to high-end luxury sports cars. Each one represents a substantial investment in a vital asset for our maritime operation that we cannot even accommodate for proper berthing spaces. While we have received support from both the US government and the Japanese government for the development of the Coast Guard Vessel Support Facility in Buliluyan, Palawan, and the Vessel Support Facility in Subic Bay area, it is crucial that our national government also acknowledges the significance of our vessel as a multi-billion peso investment. Although it is often said that we must put where our money where our mouth is, I would argue that the value of the Coast Guard vessels far exceeds any potential revenue from the port dues if only limited berthing space is allocated by the Philippine Ports Authority. Ensuring proper support of our fleet is not just an investment in infrastructure, it is an investment for national security. In conclusion, I want to affirm that the Philippine Coast Guard remains to have an unwavering commitment that despite our limited resources, our dedication to defending what is rightfully ours remains strong. We will continue to seek innovative ways to highlight China's blatant violations of international law, bullying tactics, and aggressive actions before the international community. We refuse to let the Chinese intimidation tactics succeed because of our silence. As a staunch advocate of international law, which serves as equalizer among nations, we recognize that the People's Republic of China will not be held accountable if we remain silent in the face of such aggression. With this conviction, the Philippine Coast Guard, under the leadership of Admiral Gabran, will use its modest resources to ensure that our voices are heard and that the violators of the international law and bully countries like China will be held accountable. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang bagong Pilipinas.
Thank you very much, Commodore J. Tariela. Very, very strong statements from our speakers for this panel. And I'm sure that many of you have questions you wish to ask from our speakers. So at this point, we will now proceed to our open forum. So may we call back on stage our panelists, please. Colonel Francel Taborlupa, Admiral Roy Trinidad, General Fabi Pedregosa, and also Commodore J. Tariela. And this panel will be moderated by Mr. Don McLean Gill, non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute and also a lecturer at the De La Salle University's Department of International Studies.
Ambassador Carlson, Professor Manhit, Justice Carpio, distinguished guests and colleagues, good day. Well, allow me to once again thank Professor Manhit and StratBase for organizing and setting up such an important forum, such an important discussion on such an important day. And of course, it is an equal honor to moderate this session along and in the presence of the great pillars of Philippine security. So we have a lot to talk about, and I will try to leave some room out for the questions and answers, but we will try to highlight some of the key aspects of the respective presentations and discussions of our distinguished panel. I like it old school, like writing my notes. Today, on the one hand, we are 9 years into the arbitral victory. On the other hand, we are in the midterm of the Marcos Jr. administration, which has endeavored to prioritize the security of Philippine sovereignty, sovereign rights, and maritime zones, and particularly through the operationalization of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Now, this is a question I'd like to pose to all our distinguished panelists. Given, of course, the status of our strategic environment today, how would you evaluate the position of the Philippines in relations to our efforts, the Philippine effort to defend its sovereignty and sovereign rights? Major General?
I think the Philippines is, especially the Armed Forces of the Philippines, is on the right track through its modernization program. Investments are coming in terms of acquiring capabilities, especially on integrated air and missile defense and maritime security as well. We just saw the growth of the Philippine Coast Guard and the multiple multinational exercise that has been going on. And the level of exercise is getting better and better and deeper and deeper. As we speak, Cope Thunder 2025-2 is ongoing. And we're doing an exercise with an F-35 aircraft, of course, from the United States. And that kind of exercise with a stealth aircraft, high technology system, just shows the level of training exercises and the capability development that the Armed Forces of the Philippines is pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General. Colonel?
This is in tandem with the different government agencies and non-government agencies. We have a powers of the state. So each state has their powers. So we have the diplomatic, information, military, and economic. So while the diplomatic arm is being done by our colleagues from the DFA, us from the Armed Forces of the Philippines are well underway with implementing the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, being us operationalizing it with the comprehensive archipelagic defense operations. And we're doing it three-pronged. We are modernizing, and we are looking at the contemporary modern challenges by having a re-Horizon 3. That means we're looking at what really matters at this point in time. So we are going to be modernizing heavily on maritime assets, aerial assets, and cyber capabilities as a whole. Over and above that, we are also strengthening alliances with like-minded nations and well-meaning nations, and we have reported a while ago the increasing number of alliances that we have. In fact, for our Balikatan exercises this year was one of the biggest, with a lot of other nations signifying their intentions by being observers, and others actively participating as well. So we are modernizing, we are strengthening alliances, and over and above that, we're looking at internally doing so as well. So we're recruiting for more troops to join us with our expansive recruitment of reservists as well as force multipliers. So I think, as what Sir said, we are on the right track on this, and we're moving forward.
Thank you, Colonel. Rear Admiral?
Thank you, Don. We have the perfect policy and strategy match with the current administration. We have been through administrations where we had no pronounced or deliberate policy. and no AFP strategy. We have been through a situation that we had no policy, but the AFP had its own strategy for the maritime domain. A more difficult situation, non-attribution, is a policy of non-interference in our maritime domain. But in spite of that, I would like to say, as I've always said during different press conferences with my partners here, that your AFP will keep performing its mandate of ensuring the integrity of the national territory. Today, with the current administration, the policy is very clear, the strategy is very clear. We are on the right path.
Thank you very much, sir. Commodore?
Thank you, Professor, for a very interesting question. Since all the branches of the Armed Forces of the Philippines already responded with a question as to where are we now in defending our own sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea, I would like to look at it in the lens of how the international community, particularly the regional neighbors, see our efforts in fighting for our sovereignty and sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. You know, before President Marcos was elected, and when he delivered his first State of the Nation address of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power, most of the Southeast Asian countries are only always left with two choices. Either we ignore or we respond. We believe that, you know, if there are incursions within our own exclusive economic zone, most ASEAN countries, particularly Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and even the Philippines, think that ignoring such violation of the People's Republic of China would just be okay. Because if you're going to respond, it will be it will going to impact your own national interest because of the economic trade and investment. But under this administration, as we assert our position in the West Philippine Sea, through the transparency efforts, we are now giving the Southeast Asian countries a third option, and that is to expose. We are telling Southeast Asian countries that it is not just a binary option of ignoring or responding, but exposing the blatant violation of China in the entire South China Sea is also an option that you can, apply to the People's Republic of China, while at the same time, the international community, particularly the like-minded states, will be able to support you. It gave them a realization that ignoring the violation of the Chinese government will not support their own national interests. And we can already see baby steps from Vietnam and even Malaysians and Indonesia trying to adopt the transparency initiative that we have right now.
Thank you very much, Commodore. A very strong and resilient and a reassuring first round of questions. And I'd like to dig in deeper with the respective discussions that you have raised earlier on. And I'd like to begin with Colonel Taberlupa. The scope, depth, and frequency of the Philippines' military-to-military cooperation and exercises with our traditional ally and our partners, both traditional and non-traditional, have increased over the years. And this is, of course, a clear representation of our adherence to the rules-based order. However, I'd like to ask about the logistical challenges that have been faced in order to sustain these operations. What measures has the AFP taken to address these challenges for the long run?
Foremost, there are two key words to that. No? With our alliances, we want two things. It's integration and interoperability. So we have been conducting these exercises to look into how we would interoperate with different like-minded nations and well-meaning nations in different scenarios. So as you have seen, we have over and above the Balikatan exercises, we have the multilateral maritime exercises. So we have different types of exercises, from communications to command and control to all of the scenario-based solutions that we could have in any possibility. In terms of logistics, that's where our alliances would come in. Like our RAA with Japan will also help, being a highly developed country, so they can help us in command and control solutions. and of course, detection capability. We have this with other allied nations as well, with our detection capability in the detecting dark vessels from solutions from other countries as well. So these are all part of what comes into play whenever we have our VFAs or SOLFAs or RAAs. These are all part of it. So this has been taken into consideration and it's well underway to being implemented as well.
Thank you very much for the very insightful response, Colonel. I'd like to switch over to Rear Admiral Trinidad, sir. Your excellent presentation on the Philippine Navy's take. And as we can see, and as we have clearly reaffirmed, the Philippine Navy has demonstrated great strength in securing the maritime zones of our nation in the face of a much larger, revisionist, and belligerent power. Now, what does that say about the Philippine Navy's and the broader Philippine commitment towards the rules-based order for our domestic and even international audiences?
First and foremost, that we have a responsibility to the international community to ensure that our backyard is safe and secured. This will mean that as we protect the international order, we have to do all our actions within the bounds of domestic and international law. That will be our contribution to the international effort to secure the rules-based order. Secondly, it is not an easy challenge. The shift from internal to external has brought a lot of changes in the Philippine Navy. We had to decommission our legacy ships. We had to look at support and sustainment, not merely acquisition. We had to give emphasis on the people, upskilling the people with the right mindset, the right skills, the right know-how. Thirdly, it is an approach that the Philippine Navy is not taking solely, but we do it with the Air Force, with the Army, and with other government agencies such as the Coast Guard, BFAR, and even the PNP Maritime Police. So what we are pushing forward here is when we go external defense, it will be a whole of government, whole of society, whole of country approach.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral. Very clear, very concise. I'd like to turn over to Major General Pedregosa. Sir, your presentation highlighted a number of very important facets of the importance of the Air Force. Various conflicts across the world, as you've mentioned, in the Middle East, South Asia, have put a spotlight on the role of the Air Force and the corresponding importance of radars, satellite-based surveillance systems, and air defense systems. The Philippine Air Force is also building up its capabilities. Now, what are the current and long-term priorities of the Philippine Air Force to enhance its air and missile defense?
The priorities particularly is first developing our ability to see and hear what's happening in around our airspace, our maritime space, and also cyberspace. So the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability is very important, and we're developing that capability. Next is the ability to intercept threats with various levels, from missile system to unmanned aerial system on different levels, to air breathing targets, and also to provide support to our maritime partner, which is the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard. So the ability to intercept. Next is to protect our command and control nodes from cyber security attack. And also, lastly, to network every system so that, again, as I've mentioned in my presentation, every commander, every sensor, every fighter, every operator is in sync with what's happening right now. And our exercises are doing that already. And we have laid out the foundation. And in the realization of the Horizon 3, moving forward, we will realize these capabilities.
Thank you very much, Major General. And if I may have the pleasure of asking you as well, Commodore Tariela, the Philippine Coast Guard has been at the front lines of China's expansionist ambitions in the West Philippine Sea. Now, if I may ask, sir, from these experiences, what lessons and observations could you share with us here today?
Well, I think I have been mentioning this a lot of times already. For the Philippine Coast Guard, what we can share to other countries as well is the impact of the transparency efforts. We realized how effective it is for the People's Republic of China to be called out by the international community regarding their violation of the international law. We also, tried to. The reason why I highlighted the fact that the Coast Guard is not just primarily doing job at the West Philippine Sea, it's because sometimes, for example, I got the question from the reporter. They were saying like the 35-meter vessels that you are procuring from France, these are way too smaller compared with the 44-meter vessels that you have. And it is antithesis with the 97-meter vessel that are supposed to be deployed in the West Philippine Sea. So on the one hand, we realize that we need bigger vessels for us to prolong our stay in the West Philippine Sea. And for some people who will be asking, then why are we procuring 40, 35-meter vessels? That is actually the reason why I started with that kind of discussion in my remarks. I would like to highlight that those 35-meter vessels are also going to be used by the Coast Guard for our other mandates. But in terms of the learning curve in patrolling the West Philippine Sea, we need larger Coast Guard vessels.
Very clearly explained, Commodore. Thank you very much. Before heading to the other set of individual questions, I'd like to again ask a general question for all our panelists. At a time when the Philippines is faced with a number of sophisticated security challenges across various domains, how are our various security agencies able to work together to achieve cross or multi-domain deterrence for the short to long term? Major General, perhaps you
Um, in the shift of the armed forces of the Philippines from internal to territorial or external defense, we could see a lot of organizational changes, investment on communication, on interoperability, communications, and cyber. Across the major services, but also together with the Philippine Coast Guard in the future, and other security agencies. The goal is to be interoperable, to communicate with each other, and to work jointly. So previously, during our focus on internal security operations, the major services works in region, in different area of operation. But now with the whole theater of the Philippines, we need to work jointly. And at the same time, with the one theater concept with our allies in the Indo-Pacific, we have to work with them in combined operations.
Thank you, sir. Colonel?
Yes, we acknowledge that there is unity. With unity, there is strength. So we have to build it internally foremost. So that's why our armed forces of the Philippines has been trying to evolve as well with the new challenges out there. So along with land, air, and sea, now we have created the cyber domain, the cyber command to address issues in cyber domain, and we also came up with our intel command. So with that, internally, we have like our exercises, as we said, Dagit Pa enhances our internal jointness within the armed forces of the Philippines. And then moving outward, we have our alliances with like-minded nations and well-meaning nations with MMCAs and Balikatan exercises and whatnot. And as we said, as we move forward, now we are embracing the one theater concept. So from internal to external, we're moving forward towards united front, towards one main goal.
That's wonderful, Colonel. Thank you. Rear Admiral.
Don, I'd like to focus more on the non-uniform agencies of government.
Yes, please.
So far, the AFP, the PNP, the Coast Guard, we have already more or less gotten our acts together. But the bigger challenge here is the interagency effort. Why? Because the threat we face is not only a threat that could be addressed by one instrument of national power, the military. A Western thought is that we exhaust all other instruments of power before we use the military instrument. But the Chinese Communist Party, at the very onset, they already use an interplay of the different instruments of national power. Hence, the need for all agencies of government of the Philippines to come together. It is not one particular agency that would take the lead, much as almost everybody would like to take the lead and act like they're taking the lead. But we will be more effective if in the whole of government approach, all agencies of government would come together to be able to address the different threats. Like, for example, if you look at the information domain, we get bombarded by malign influence. We look at the socio-cultural aspect, the Sister Cityhood Project. We look at the retirees, fighting age males settling down in the Philippines, who could get birth certificates. So there's a lot of checking from our side on the appropriate government agency. We look at the influx of Chinese students in the northern part of the country. So across all domains, we get hit. And it's not only the AFP, the defense establishment, or the uniformed services that should address these different threats. It must be a whole of government and even eventually a whole of society effort. We have here the WPS Atin Ito contingent. We have here from the film industry. So it would take a national consciousness wherein everybody's involved to be able to address these threats.
Wonderfully said, Rear Admiral. And an elevation of consciousness is indeed needed as the situation continues to exacerbate. Commodore Tariela.
Well, I think the Philippine Coast Guard can be able to harmonize our efforts with the Armed Forces of the Philippines and other line government agencies in the West Philippine Sea because of the existing system of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea. As you all know, this is chaired by the National Security Advisor and the Armed Forces of the Philippines and different departments from DND, DFA, Department of Justice are all part of the National Task Force. So in this interagency mechanism, we can be able to collaborate and coordinate. For example, the deployment of the Armed Forces of the Philippines in one area. They came up with Area Task Force North and Area Task Force West. So we can be able to supplement the deployment of the Coast Guard together with the limitation of the Philippine Navy as well at some areas. And then on the other hand, the BFAR or even the Philippine Navy can also cover those areas that we cannot go as well.
Thank you very much, Commodore. Very precisely said and accurate as well. Now towards the last set of individual questions, and we'll probably see if we have time for some Q&As. Well, first I'd like to ask Colonel Tabralupa first. With the various exercises, again going back to the the significance of the presentations that you have discussed, and the joint operations that have been conducted over the years, how has and how will the AFP integrate these experiences and engagements into operational readiness and preparedness across the services?
Foremost, we live it. It should be really part of how we are, even if you're coming from a deep sleep, you know where to go, what to do, what to bring, those things. It should be institutionalized personally to all the units. I would also like to amend my answer a while ago that even the government has came up with a new law. Actually, it's a revitalized law on the self-reliant defense posture. So when that came out, we're looking at internally what is indigenous to us. And the Filipinos are known to be very resilient, and they can actually have really age-old equipment come to life still. No? So with this, we have to leverage on this talent of Filipinos. And we also have very, very talented soldiers with us as well. So we want to inculcate this into our institutionalized to each soldier. And it is not just for defense, particularly when we prepare. We're very heavily towards humanitarian assistance and disaster response. And we have been showing that this is really very effective. Our training are always kicking in every time there are incidents of typhoons and other calamities that we need to respond to. So with that, I think every soldier is well on its way towards that. And the younger generations are also very tech savvy, and we're leveraging on that tech savvy young ones to also be our keyboard warriors and our cyber warriors in the future too.
Thank you, Colonel. Very inspiring indeed. I'd like to turn over to Rear Admiral Trinidad. Sir, as an archipelagic state, we cannot underplay the significance of maritime security. What are the key priorities of the Philippine Navy's modernization as we are expecting a more tumultuous geopolitical landscape in the West Philippine Sea, coinciding with a more expansionist, a more aggressive China, power-hungry, and projects power through the seas?
I mentioned earlier that it's not only acquiring the platform or the hardware. We need to be able to look into the support and sustainment side. In the 1950s, 1960s, we were the #1 Navy in the region. This was just after World War II. But because of neglecting the support and sustainment side, we went down into the state that we were in the 1990s and the 80s and 90s. This time, history is affording us another opportunity to develop our naval capabilities. We need not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Focus on support and sustainment. Number 2, asymmetric capability. We are not a big country. We don't have a large economy. But there are other approaches that a small country, a small armed forces, a small navy could be able to offset the inherent advantages of a stronger adversary. The Philippine Navy right now, in coordination with the Air Force and the Army, and even the Coast Guard, we're looking at asymmetric capabilities that will be able to give us better leverage. And lastly, we are focusing on the people. We need the right mindset. Today's youth, the general youth of today, the techies, the TikTok mentality, and we have found out that it's different when they join the military compared to 15, 20, 25 years ago. What used to be non-existent problems back then, it's hard to say, sad to say this, but incidents of suicide are quite high right now in the armed forces. We need to address that. So it's not only the hardware, the software, sustainment, but more importantly, the people. At the end of the day, behind every machine will be the man and the woman.
Thank you, sir. The grassroots approach is indeed very important and should not be overlooked, as you have rightfully said, sir. Major General, if I may again turn to you, sir. China's high-intensity gray zone activities and operations against the Philippines, they're not just concentrated in the maritime domain. We have witnessed recently China's escalatory and unprovoked aggression in the Philippine airspace, and of course during our lawful operations within our area, particularly with the use of flares. And I believe many of our other partners in Europe and Australia have also experienced this recently. How is the Philippine Air Force adapting to such realities, knowing that this could in fact increase as the time goes on, sir?
Without going into specific details, the activity of unmanned aerial system, aircraft patrolling West Philippine Sea from China has increased significantly. And we are monitoring that on a daily basis. So just would like to inform everyone that we have the ability to monitor our West Philippine Sea. And we are used to it. We continue to operate, we continue to do our exercise despite of those challenges, and we will never yield. We will continue to do what is right for us in our territorial airspace, over our territorial waters. Again, as we speak, we're doing exercises almost throughout the year. And in those exercises, some are challenged, some are not. But we continue to fly and we ignore them. We continue to perform our patrol. We continue to monitor our airspace. And we know their activities. And I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Major General. And lastly, I'd like to turn again to Commodore Tariela. And I think that this is a major question that lingers in the minds of many of our partners. The past few years, we have witnessed a number of important MOUs signed between the Philippines and our ally and our partners. In terms of the Philippine Coast Guard, what are ways in which we can institutionalize these forms of cooperation to ensure long-term sustainability amidst future uncertainties of regional geopolitics? Sir.
Well, for the Philippine Coast Guard, we also have an existing memorandum of understanding with other Coast Guard organizations, like for example with Indonesia, Bakamla, the Vietnam Coast Guard, and Japan Coast Guard as well. The Japanese Coast Guard have signed up like 3 memorandum of understanding as well for information sharing and maritime domain awareness. These are ways that we can be able to institutionalize our engagement with one another as a fellow Coast Guard organization. But in dealing with Southeast Asian countries, particularly with Bakamla, for example, of the Indonesian Coast Guard, Malaysian Coast Guard, MMEA, and the Vietnam Coast Guard, there are issues when it comes to the South China Sea as a sensitive issue that you cannot force them to formalize. But other than that, we still been able to establish maritime cooperation, but in other concerns that has mutual interest between countries.
Thank you very much, Commodore. Before that, we'd like to ask the organizers, do we have time for a Q&A or 9 minutes? All right, so we could probably have 1 round or 2 rounds, depending on the length of Q&As, and we'll probably collect it by groups. So we'll have 1 round first of around 3 or 4 questions, then we'll take it from there. And kindly mention if it's a general question or directed towards any of our distinguished panel members. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Oh, yes, sir. At the back.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Lieutenant Commander Limbag, sir, from the Philippine Coast Guard, sir. And my question for everyone in the panel, sir. Sir, I have that MDA is often discussed during the previous discussion, sir, and it was discussed qualitatively, sir. So my question is there a way, a framework or a method to quantify MDA so that we can better assess the gaps and our existing capabilities in terms of MDA, sir? That's all, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions before we turn to the panel? Okay, seeing that there's none, so perhaps we could maximize and magnify. So particularly, I believe the question was, is there the way to quantify MDA? Sir.
Yes. Every time that we have the NTF-WPS meeting, they're the one that collates all the data coming from different military services, whether from the Air Force, the Navy, and Area Command, together with the Philippine Coast Guard and the National Maritime Council. They are using diverse MDA capability from dark vessel detection of the Canadian government to the sea vision of the United States. Even the Crimario of the European Union are also being used to collate all this data. And then every time we have NTF-WPS, these data are being presented. This is where we make the counting and frequency of the number of China Coast Guard vessels in a particular week or even months. So yes, that's how the national government, through NTF-WPS and of course through NMC, make use of all those data infrastructure for MDA.
Thank you, Commodore. Would anyone like to jump on that particular question too? Or should we go to the, okay. Okay, so yes, we have a virtual question. Why is it still called a concept, particularly the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, when it is already being implemented? I believe that this is also for the panel.
Yes, thank you. The S&D mentioned that we will be implementing a comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. It is conceptual, it's imaginary, it is void of shape and form. And then the shape, the form, the details will have to be built. When it came down to the armed forces, the appropriate campaign plan, the name just skips my mind right now, dictates that the AFP will now conduct comprehensive archipelagic defense operations. So we are now operationalizing the concept. The concept states that we will defend and secure all the way up to the exclusive economic zone. The operations right now are doing just that, based on the campaign plan, the name of which I just could not recall as of the moment.
Colonel.
Thank you.
To just segment what our good Rear Admiral said. In terms of it's the levels. So from the strategic level, it's the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. And for us in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we implement it through the comprehensive archipelagic defense operations dubbed as Tatag Kapuluan. So that's how the levels of implementation come into play.
Thank you very much, Colonel. Would anyone want to add to that, Major General?
For Tatag Kapuluan, the different units, particularly major services, have an in-plan to realize and operationalize it. So from CADC to Tatag Kapuluan and the operating concepts, operating plans in the operating unit. I would just like to answer the MDA on the first question. On a daily basis, 24/7, I get report regarding MDA. And the amount of data that we have right now is enormous. But we are able to monitor everything.
Thank you very much, Major General. Would anyone else want to add? Or do we have any other questions? All right. Seeing that there are none, first of all, I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for shedding such important light on all of us today, and again, on such a very important day. So thank you very much to our distinguished panel. Thank you, Strat-based Professor Manhit, and I look forward to more of these engagements in the future. Marami pong salamat.
Right, may we request our speaker and our speakers and moderator to please stay on stage for a quick photo opportunity, together with Strat-based Institute President, Professor Dindo Manhit, please. All right, let's give this panel another round of applause, please, for a very comprehensive and insightful discussion. Thank you very much again, Colonel Francel Taborlupa, Admiral Roy Trinidad, General Fabi Pedregosa, and Commodore J. Tariela, and of course, to the moderator, Mr. Don McLean Gill. All right, we are now down to the third and final panel for today's conference, but still a very, very important one and very interesting. We have a good set of experts for this one. Now, for this panel, we will examine how a rising middle power like the Philippines continues to challenge a major power like China, anchored on the enduring significance of the 2016 Arbitral Award. This panel will also explore the broader implications of growing international support for the Philippines and how this shapes the future of the West Philippine Sea and the wider Indo-Pacific. All right, our first presentation is a very interesting one, so if I may request everyone to please settle down first so we can all have your attention, your undivided attention, because this presentation is very interesting. All right, so to start our discussion this afternoon, it will be an assessment of China's aggression in the West Philippine Sea. He will be presenting, our speaker will be presenting his findings on this topic based on satellite imagery. All right, so joining us is a retired United States Air Force officer who is also a non-resident fellow of the Strat-based Institute. He is also the director of Project Sea Light. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Colonel Raymond Powell.
I like how at the end of the day you say we are down to the last one. So we are now scraping the bottom of the barrel with Ray Powell. So I'm not going to talk about satellite imagery this time. I thought I would mix it up a little bit because we've been noticing some things recently, and we thought that we'd bring you in on it. Because ultimately, the battle for the West Philippine Sea is really a cognitive one. You've heard this term cognitive thrown around quite a bit today, and it really is a battle for our minds, right? China ultimately does not want to win by fighting. He wants to win by capitulation. They want to win by having their adversaries give up, say it's not worth it. So of course I give my Sun Tzu here. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So, I thought I'd start just by sharing what it's like to be me a little bit. So this is from last year, and I just wanted to let all of my fan club know that I will be back in Davao for another wedding this year. So if you happen to see another visibly Caucasian man there, it wouldn't necessarily be me, okay? So even if he has short hair, my wife agrees that although I don't look like him, she does agree that I'm visibly Caucasian. Next slide. So this is what we have currently up on the sealight.live website, and it has to do with the statement that I issued early this week. And really, I just wanted to use our experience as a way to illustrate the battle for our minds that is happening, right? So this is a personalized experience from Ray Powell and Sea Light's perspective, but it's just the tip of the iceberg of what's actually going on. I think there's probably one person in this room who probably knows even better than I do, Mr. Tariella here in the front. But this is, the reason I want to draw your attention to this is that the things that are said about this are not merely respectful disagreements about policy. Rather, what we are seeing is a coordinated messaging campaign from Beijing carried by willing enablers here in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does that messaging look like? Well, we see here's Ray Powell, the instrument of the military-industrial complex. We see this quite a bit. This is a Global Times article, so this comes from China. This is part of their state newspapers put out in English. And so they are making it clear that Project Myoshu, which was the precursor to Sea Light, is somehow the tool of this military-industrial complex. Let me make it very clear that for anyone who would like to fund Sea Light, we like money. We wouldn't mind having money. We just don't. So, but, it's nice of you to notice. And then, of course, from the China Daily, we see these, the Project Myoshu and the Transparency Initiative somehow being part and parcel of this U.S.-controlled effort to using journalists as our tool to illuminate things and make China look bad in the South China Sea. The whole point of the Transparency Initiative is China doesn't have to have our help to look bad. All they have to do is let them turn on the cameras, and they look bad all by themselves. Go ahead and see if we can advance this next thing. Do we have it with the sound?
Meet Ray Powell. Since 2023, this retired U.S. Air Force colonel has been flooding social media platform X with over 6,000 posts about the South China Sea.
The U.S. military's deep involvement becomes clear when we look at Project Myoshu, led by Powell. With the goal of undermining China, Project Myoshu operates out of Stanford University's Gordian Knot Center. Though it presents an academic facade, the GKC is actually backed by the U.S. Office of Naval Research.
All right, that's just a really quick, this is obviously a TikTok video put out. Does anybody recognize the young people who are presenting that? If you recall, Secretary Teodoro and General Bronner were accosted in the hallways at the Shangri-La dialogue. That's those people. So they run a little organization, they call it Media Unlocked or China Unlocked, and it's this very tabloidy thing using these young, attractive faces, and they sort of throw out these unsubstantiated claims about all of these ties. I get my share here, of course Jay gets his share, but they decided to go ahead and enter the Shangri-La dialogue as China Daily journalists, and after, of course, they essentially put out a bunch of garbage about Secretary Teodoro and General Bronner by ambushing them in the hallway, they were kicked out. And then they have a whole other TikTok video where they complain about being kicked out. But the reason I highlight this is to emphasize the fact that this is messaging coming from Beijing. Next slide.
The U.S. military...
Next, yeah. Okay, but then eventually it gets here, right? And you get the Filipino voices that are going to do their part to echo what China is saying. And here's where I want to, here's what, 5 minutes left? Come on, I just started. Here's what I really want to bring your attention to, is these are messages coming from Beijing that are being carried along. This is not just respectful discourse over policy. The Philippines needs respectful discourse. Democracies need respectful discourse. What we don't need is people carrying the propaganda of a foreign hostile power. And that's what's happening here. And by the way, I like how I've progressed from being just a warmonger to an actual war criminal. So I'm obviously moving up in the world. Next slide, please. So here's one example. And so to the left, we have an op-ed that was written about a year ago in the Global Times, so in China's state newspaper, by a Filipino, right, Herman Teo Laurel. And then 4 days later, a virtually identical article under a different name, Rod Kapunen, in the Manila Standard. By the way, the one on the right, since I posted this early this week, this has been taken down. So we've had to go and find the cached versions of that article to be able, so that you can still see it. So if you go to sealight.live and you want to see these two side by side, you can still do this because we've linked to the cached version of the second article. Next slide. All right, so just here's an example, okay? We see security talks came after much double talk by US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Let's say that it comes after much double talk by Blinken. Okay. Aimed at the recent provisional arrangement, okay? Aimed at the recent de-escalation deal, all right? Which has somewhat reduced tensions between the two countries. All right. Seems like maybe they're working off the same notes. Next slide. All right, I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, believe me. But in conjunction with this thing, Blinken criticized alleged escalating actions at sea by China. Let's see, Blinken, on the other hand, criticized alleged actions at sea by China. Remember, these are two different articles, two different newspapers, two different countries, 4 days apart. All right? While hypocritically applauding the China-Philippines de-escalation arrangement, while hypocritically applauding they're not even trying. This isn't even good plagiarism, right? This is just lazy. Next slide, please. Oh, and of course, Colonel Raymond Powell has to make his appearance, which of course is on the auspices of the Office of Naval Research, conceived a cognitive warfare operation known as Project Mushu. You can see it down there in the second article. This goes on, the last sentence, this goes on for the entire article. So you can put them side by side. It is the same article with very minor variations written twice. You tell me, what's happening here? Is Rod Kapunen just, plagiarizing and taking this other article and making it easy on himself? Or is this coordination, and where are these points coming from? Well, we've seen all these points before. They're just coming from Beijing. Next slide. I just felt like I had to mention my friend Mr. Samante, because he really does deserve a special mention for being the president of the fan club. I've counted 18 articles that he's written about Sea Light. I really think he needs some new material, so if you have some ideas, maybe you could write him. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to sort of close by letting you know that I will be in Davao, and in case it comes up, go ahead and hit the next slide, please.
This confirms that Powell is CIA.
So now you know, it's been confirmed. So when you do see the picture of the white guy with a hat and short hair, it's got to be me, because I'm CIA. Last slide, please. Just final note here. The Sea Light, of course, is the website, sealight.live. There is a podcast. The one that we will be putting out early next week will be my interview with Secretary Teodoro. So be on the lookout for that. We talk a lot about the CAD-C, so that was a big topic of conversation. Urge you to go ahead and listen to the podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Colonel Ray Powell, for that very interesting presentation. I'm sure that some of you have questions that you want to ask him later on. You can save your questions for the open forum later. He'll be back on stage. All right, our next discussion will focus on how vital it is for the Philippines to broaden its cooperation beyond maritime security. And to tell us more about this, please welcome the chairperson of the Department of International Studies of the De La Salle University, Manila, Dr. Charmaine Willoughby.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm very honored to be here today in commemoration of the 2016 Arbitration Award that heavily favored the Philippines. In view of such, maritime security, because of the 2016 Arbitration Award, maritime security has been front and center in Philippine foreign policy with very good reason. However, and ironically, how we study the sea, and this is coming from an academic's perspective, how we study the sea seems to be very much taken for granted. Often, we define maritime security as, for example, as we've talked about today, sovereign and territorial claims like the Philippines and China, freedom of navigation and overflight, etc. But what about if we move the discussion a little bit to look at the fish, the marine ecosystem? What about when we start talking about coral rubble and the environmental degradation as a result of states' activities in the waters? And furthermore, what about when we start talking about the plight of the fisher folks? What about when we talk about law enforcement out there in the waters? Do these things still fall under the category of maritime security? In this regard, I make the argument, in the 10 minutes that I have with you today, I make the argument that there are imperatives for shifting our conceptual lens from the stricter notions of maritime security to something that is a little bit broader, which is now understood as blue security. So what I want to do today is that I want to make a case for shifting our visions, our mindset from maritime security to blue security, and here I will identify 3 reasons. The first is in regard to the fact that for all the attention that states pay to the maritime domain, the academic discipline of international relations is peculiarly and stubbornly sea blind. This means that there is a compelling reason for this sea blindness is that territoriality is a foundational pillar of the discipline. The Westphalian roots of the modern state system are predicated on territories delineated on sovereignty and legitimized by recognition. In this context, international relations and maritime security falls within this discipline, is a land-based discipline. And to the extent that we see maritime security, this is simply an extension of power projection out there in the waters. As a result, the way that we see the waters, the seas, fall into the following categories. We see the waters as a space that needs to be either tamed, traversed, or controlled. So our policies regarding the waters fall under these different visions of how we see the waters. Hence, the first imperative really for shifting how we see the sea rests on the fact that maritime security as we understand it in this forum today is oftentimes perceived as simply an extension of power politics on land. Sea blindness, apparently, is a thing. The second imperative for rethinking how we view the sea has to do with dimensions that add further nuance to the study of the waters in international relations. Whereas historically, maritime security found a likely equivalence with interstate conflicts, the agenda today is so much broader. The concept of blue security resonates with the multifaceted nature of issues in the maritime domain, incorporating national, regional, international, human, and environmental factors. Of course, interstate conflicts remain an indispensable aspect within the blue security framework. But considering the competing claims in the South China Sea and notwithstanding the 2016 arbitration award, interstate conflicts do continue to shape the maritime security agenda. But what's important here is that beyond this, beyond state-centric analysis and understandings of maritime security, there is another dimension that, for instance, involves maritime terrorism and extremist violence, a phenomenon that involves not just states, but also non-state actors. Yet another dimension of the maritime security agenda revolves around the intricate linkages of various blue crimes. Blue crimes can be divided into crimes against mobility, against flows, and against the environment. Crimes against mobility harm global trade by causing supply chain disruptions, economic losses, and dangers to seafarers, passengers, coastal economies, and port facilities. Some examples here include piracy, kidnapping, seizing ships and cargo, robbery, theft, and cybercrimes that can potentially halt or disrupt port operations. Smuggling is also another example here, as well as the environmental impact of these activities, which cannot be undermined. Thus, the second imperative for shifting from maritime security to blue security is that we see a proliferation of actors, both state actors and non-state actors in this particular space. The third and final reason for why we need to change how we view the sea is because states are already doing it. States are already acknowledging that maritime security, as we currently understand it, is actually broader than that and includes not just states, but also non-state actors. The Philippines and Australia, for example, mirror this shift from maritime security to blue security. The Philippines in November 2024 enacted significant maritime security frameworks. Australia, on the other hand, established its civil maritime security strategy in 2021. And together, the two countries have deepened their partnership in the civil maritime security domain. Obviously, there are still issues and areas of collaboration at the state and the sub-state level, and I don't have enough time to go through them right now, but suffice it to say that these kinds of engagements and activities are ongoing. So in closing, I'd like to reiterate that the maritime security agenda is no longer the sole purview of states. Instead, it is now more widely recognized that maritime security has spillover effects on humans and the environment. Maritime security is now broadened, and hopefully this would take root, is now broadened to blue security. I'd be happy to explain this further during the Q&A. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charmaine Willoughby. It is now time to hear about how regional maritime security is being deepened through joint activities. Our next speaker for today is a trustee, program convener, and non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute, and also a professor of De La Salle University Manila's International Studies Department. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Renato De Castro.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know I'm one of the last speakers, and I'm blocking your way between a perfect weekend. So I'll do my best to be entertaining as possible and short. So my presentation looks at what could we basically happen if we try to link all the security partnerships and alliance together. We'll be creating China's nightmare. And of course, China's nightmare is an Asian, or I call Indo-Pacific NATO. Okay? So we start with a maritime cooperative activity that happened in April 2024, Australia, Japan, the United States, and the Philippines. And of course, it was really a naval exercise because it involved anti-submarine drill. So first time, of course, you have active participation of navies, not Coast Guard. Then interestingly, of course, during that time, they reaffirmed the July 12, 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling. And of course, this captures the very essence of the approach of this conference this year. Yeah, international law is important, but it has to be backed by military capability. If I have to quote Frederick the Great, diplomacy without the military capability is just like conducting music without the instrument. I hope there's somebody from our Filipino diplomat here to understand. Diplomacy by itself is useless without the military capability and, more importantly, alliances and security partnerships. So, of course, in their joint statement, the three leaders express grave concern over Chinese coercive and expansionist behavior in the South China Sea, which, of course, at this point in time could not simply be resolved by diplomacy alone. Diplomacy, of course, entails words, but it has to be backed by, of course, clear naval capability. And, of course, what basically happened was what we're witnessing right now, of course, is a security partnership, the trilateral security partnership that, of course, happened, I think it was around April 2024, the creation of the trilateral Philippine-US-Japan security partnership to back up, of course, the arbitral tribunal ruling with a clear-cut naval capability based, of course, on... Okay, great, I could sing. Filipino sing karaoke. So it has to be backed, of course, by the development of alliances and partnerships since, of course, at the end of the day, despite you talk about comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, we can only do so much. It has to be backed, of course, by alliances and security partnership. So in the process, the Philippines, Japan, and the US are transforming their bilateral alliance system. You have two alliances, Philippine, US, and of course, US-Japan security partnership into a trilateral partnership. And of course, linking the three American alliances together creates this, what we call by former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, the lattice work of Indo-Pacific alliances and security partnership. So again, will the establishing a lattice work of alliance and security partnership provide the necessary opportunity for forming China's worst nightmare, an Indo-Pacific NATO-style alliance system? I would like to emphasize I'm using the term style. It could not be equivalent to what we have in, of course, the Euro-Atlantic system, a highly institutionalized, with combined military capability, but of course, and also Article 5 of the Washington Treaty of 1949. So what's happening? Of course, a key point when we talk about alliances, we talk about providing assistance to countries. There are, of course, bilateral, multilateral alliances, tight, highly structured, legalistic. Multilateral alliance, of course, what I could consider as the model of a multilateral alliance system that, of course, had survived the Cold War, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And, of course, you also have another survivor of the Cold War, which is called the hub-and-spoke system of alliances, which, of course, the Philippines is very much part of, along with Japan. South Korea, Australia, and, of course, even Taiwan used to be part of this system, hub-and-spoke system of alliance. So there are significant differences, of course, between NATO and the hub-and-spoke system of bilateral alliances. The nature of treaty commitments, the Asian alliances simply provide for consultation, while, of course, the NATO system provides, of course, for automatic assistance, Article 5. Nature of treaty commitments, multilateralism, geography, development level, inter-alliance bargaining. Of course, geography does matter a lot. In the case of NATO, it's primarily land-based. In the Indo-Pacific region, it's maritime. So the lattice work of security architecture is seen as a modification of the hub-and-spoke system of alliances that involves forging closer security ties between the US and its bilateral alliance. So what's basically happening right now is that you're seeing a convergence. The fact that the Asian alliances or Indo-Pacific alliances are starting to be linked together, creating a system of what we call NATO. So this structure of security alliances and partnership is a viable replacement for the hub-and-spoke system of alliances that will probably ensure the term used, of course, recently, even by the Trump administration, integrated deterrence. You have to link them all together. So are we forming called an Indo-Pacific style NATO alliance? So what are the three elements there? Number one, of course, is the fact that this is being encouraged by the United States government, starting, of course, with the Trump administration, number one, the Biden administration, and even the recent Trump administration. That's part of course, engaging China in a strategic competition. It's happening. Then, of course, we have the formation of minilaterals. Second Trump administration indicated its continuing interest in fostering minilateral despite the rhetoric of America first. You have, of course, Quad being revived at the initial point, and of course, as recently, the meeting of the foreign ministers of the Philippines, Japan, and the United States on the side of the ongoing ASEAN meeting in Kuala Lumpur. And of course, decision by Indo-Pacific countries to strengthen their alliance with the US. And of course, confronted by China's expansion and aggression, not only in the South China Sea, but in the East China Sea, we're having the creation of what you call a single theater of operation. Basically, from our perspective, we still see the separation between South China Sea and, of course, Taiwan Strait and East China Sea. From the perspective of China, they constitute a single theater of operation. China calls it the waters of the first waters of the first island chain, or what they call the waters of the Near Sea. So from China's perspective, the single theater, why not adopt China's view and also view it as a single theater? Given the fact that we are all faced with a single challenge, Chinese maritime expansion and coercive behavior in the waters of the first island chain. So are we seeing a NATO-style alliance in the making? So U.S. grand strategy has shifted away from engaging China in economic diplomatic competition to one that's, of course, geared in engaging China. So there has been, of course, active, persistent formation of trilateral, minilateral networks between the U.S. and the allies among its allies. Something that's really very promising and something that's been emphasized by Ambassador Kendo is the fact that the relationship between the Philippines and Japan are also dramatically improving. Mentioned, of course, is a reciprocal access agreement. I don't know about the story about the 6 destroyer escorts that the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Port might be transferring to the Philippine Navy. Is it just on news, or it might be happening? I don't know. But at least when it's clear, the Japanese has provided assistance to the Philippine Coast Guard. So, of course, fronted by Chinese aggression and expansion in the South China Sea, East China Sea, Manila, Tokyo, and more recently, even Seoul. Even South Korea has, of course, been scared by the construction of Chinese structures in the East China Sea. And I'm telling our South Korean friends and colleagues, what China did in the mischief reef is also happening to you. So never trust the Chinese when they start doing those construction. So the development of this structure is, of course, considered a deterrence against China because it limits opportunity for Beijing to divide us. So again, we don't have to talk to Washington. If we're threatened by China, we could basically talk to Tokyo or even Canberra or even Seoul. And probably we don't know, even Taipei. We don't know. It institutionalized interstate security cooperation that can persuade China to think twice about undertaking expansionist and coercive action against the Indo-Pacific states because, of course, the size and depth of this grand coalition directed, of course, against China. So thank you very much for your attention. I look forward for an interesting discussion. I hope I entertained you.
with my undergraduate antics. Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Renato De Castro. All right, for our final presentation for today, we will explore how Filipinos see the theory of victory. And to shed light on this, we have with us today a non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute and also a professor of praxis from the Ateneo School of Government. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome retired Rear Admiral Romel Jude Ong. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Joyce. Ako yung pinakahuli. Remaining distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and my upperclassmen present, good afternoon. Just a backstory. The Theory of Victory project started around May 15, 2024, that's last year. This was a project involving some of the people also in this room. Justice Tony Carpio, General Manny Bautista, Prof. Dindo Manhit, former Ambassador Lula de Rosario, former Secretary Ronald Llamas, former SND Orlando Mercado, among others that I can recall. While we were huddled in Arete, Ateneo, doing the project, Rafaela David, the mission commander of the to Scarborough Shoal, reported that they have successfully breached the Chinese blockade and execute the hasty resupply mission. Both happened May 15, 2024. Fast forward, the Theory of Victory project became a paper published by the Ateneo Policy Center last year, and a second paper published by Strat-Base around April or May of this year. The Filipino Theory of Victory should counter China's multi-domain challenges through national resilience, strategic deterrence, and calibrated response. It involves a synergy between the state and the people. As a state pursues its national interest based on a rules-based international order, it should work with an enlightened and responsible citizenry embodied with a will to fight and a will to resist any challenges against its life, way of life, and national patrimony. The forays of the Atin Ito coalition in the West Philippine Sea best captures the concept of the people's will. Defying China, this civil society movement led 3 successful missions to Scarborough, to Second Thomas Shoal, Scarborough Shoal, and later on to Pag-asa Island in May 28 of this year. These undertakings can be best described in an article which I wrote last year. It is a people's movement whose journey to sea was an effort to reach out to the hearts and minds of the Filipino people, hoping to inspire them and give a renewed sense of citizenship and a rediscovery of the values shared by an imperfect yet resilient democracy. It is a spirited effort to civilianize our exclusive economic zone and counter China's militarization of our waters and the isles and features within it. By civilianizing our seas, we reclaim agency, restore order, and allow Filipinos to enjoy the benefits of their marine resources following international law. A Filipino theory of victory should deter China from achieving the following conditions: isolating the Philippines from its US ally and its strategic partners, creating social and political discord in our society, sowing distrust among government agencies and officials, compelling our government to give up our national interests just because we fear escalation. The theory of victory propounds 2 strategic approaches: a denial strategy for now and a cost imposition strategy in times of crisis. A denial strategy avoids direct confrontation but ensures the Chinese coercion, influence operations, and territorial encroachment fails. It forces China into a prolonged contest where it cannot decisively win, eroding its ability to dictate terms, while strengthening Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights. Specifically, we opt for maintaining presence in contested waters, conducting sustained patrols, and looking at using non-lethal deterrent options. We need to counter legally Chinese efforts to divide Philippine society, sow distrust in government, influence our elections, co-opt our political elites, and conduct espionage. We need to enhance our cyber defense and security posture, combat disinformation and Chinese propaganda. And lastly, strengthen our national resiliency in terms of food and energy security. Meanwhile, a cost imposition strategy aims to make China's coercive actions prohibitively expensive, forcing Beijing to consider its approach due to high political, economic, and military costs. Specifically, we need to prepare for strengthening the lattice work of unilaterals with the US, Japan, Australia, and others, maintaining security dialogues, and maintaining 24/7, 365 days joint patrols, using denial operations via shore-based missile systems, drone swarms, and electronic warfare capabilities, establishing kill zones along our ski slopes hostile to naval movements. These strategies require adjustments in our defense and security posture, specifically a rapid shift to archipelagic defense and homeland defense, a change in the AFP force structure. We cannot fight a conventional war with a counterinsurgency organization. We need public-private partnership as a foundation of our local defense industry. This should also be complemented by political, diplomatic, legal, and economic approaches. Specifically, leveraging the arbitral ruling for international support, as we are doing now, enforcing our maritime zones and archipelagic sea lanes acts through robust maritime presence, enhancing government and civil society collaboration, reducing reliance on China for critical infrastructure while securing domestic resources to bolster our energy and food security, and educating our citizens about our national security challenges. As a strategic endgame, a Filipino theory of victory emphasizes that victory does not require overwhelming military power. Rather, it focuses on strategic resistance, alliances, and national resilience. By denying China from achieving its objectives easily, the Philippines strengthens stability to uphold its sovereignty and sovereign rights. Before I close, allow me to show a short video of the Atin Ito Coalition's third mission. To paraphrase the renowned Filipino artist Noel Cabangon, music is resistance. Before I finally surrender the floor, may I ask the members of the Atin Ito Coalition to stand up to be recognized, led by Ms. Rafaela David, Convenor, Akbayan President, and Mission Commander. Ma'am Vicky, kasama kaya ron din. Adjunct. Thank you. With that, thank you and good afternoon.
Once again, thank you very much, Rear Admiral Romel Jude Ong. Let's give him another round of applause, please. And thank you very much as well to the Atin Ito Coalition, to the Atin Ito group for joining us this afternoon. All right, at this point, we will now proceed to our open forum. And I would like to invite back on stage our speakers for this afternoon, Colonel Ray Powell, Dr. Charmaine Willoughby, Admiral Romel Ong, and Dr. Renato De Castro, please. Our moderator for this panel is Dr. Sherwin Ona, a non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute, who is also an associate professor of the De La Salle University's Department of Political Science and Development Studies.
Magandang hapon, good afternoon, Excellencies, and remaining distinguished guests. Thank you for having the patience to stay and listen to this wonderful panel that we're about to ask some controversial questions. So welcome to the last panel for today, titled Irony of Asymmetric Power. Today's geopolitical landscape is best described as multipolar and having a fragmented environment, marked by intensifying rivalries, strategic realignments, and growing systematic risk. The phenomenon known as the rise of middle powers has become a compelling one because that the states have the ability to project asymmetric power. These states can influence great powers, not through sheer size or military might, but via strategic diplomacy, institutional leadership, soft power, and niche influence. Through the use of soft balancing, for instance, coordinate diplomatic, economic, and institutional tools to raise the cost of great power moves. Middle power states can also champion norms and thus have the capacity to shape agenda and affect environments where great power operate. Now the question is, as an emerging power, can the Philippines tame the dragon? All right. Now, let's start with a general question to our panel. As the Marcos administration approaches its midterm, how would you assess the government's approach in reasserting the Philippines' sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea, given the 2016 Arbitral Award and its growing international support? This is a question for all the members of the panel. Colonel Ray?
So I want to kind of go back to a theme that I've repeated over the years that I've been sort of a part of these discussions, and that is that I really attribute a tremendous amount of credit to the Marcos administration for being willing to show its own people and the world what's happening. Because, so I mentioned before that I had the chance to interview Secretary Teodoro yesterday for the podcast. And the theme that came out is another theme that you heard in the previous panel, which is establishing a credible deterrent. And what does a credible deterrent look like? It's something that causes your adversary to pause and say, maybe what I want to do now, maybe the Philippines is not a pushover. Maybe I can't just take everything I want with no cost. And so the administration has been able, through transparency, to one, actually administer a cost, two, has been able to rally and build the support of the Filipino people to make some hard decisions and begin to build that credible deterrent, and three, rally international support from which the Philippines is now not only to continue to build the deterrent through that help, but also to weave itself into a network of partners and allies to create that one theater that we heard Admiral Trinidad talk about, so that when now China looks out at the Philippines, it doesn't see a lonely nation with a small military, but it sees a growing middle power with a growing military and a powerful network of allies.
Thank you, Colonel Ray. Charmaine, can you add to the good points made by
Sure,
Colonel Ray?
would love to. I mean, this is also a question that academics have been grappling with. How do small or medium powers respond to international crisis, or how do we navigate this environment considering our limited options? And in that situation, small and middle powers really must internationalize their issues. And this is precisely what the Marcos administration has been able to do, to continue to engage with international partners and allies and not turn our backs and do things on our own. So I think moving forward, the Philippines must continue internationalizing and reaching out to international partners and allies.
Professor?
I'll just go back to the concept that was discussed earlier, giving a little bit of an academic touch. And that's, of course, the archipelagic defense concept, which is not simply actually a concept, it is a grand strategy. Grand strategy means basically you come out with diplomatic, economic, informational, even, of course, at the end of the day, the military capability still matters. As the old saying goes, the military capability is the ultimate ratio of international relations. It basically provides you the means for the ultimate election. So CADSI, in a way, is a grand strategy. And the starting point, of course, of CADSI, and this is something that we have to emphasize, it basically changes Philippine defense concept, which interestingly before CADSI was based on War Plan Orange. Meaning, of course, we will have to defend simply the islands. And of course, original War Plan Orange, as drafted by the US Navy in the 1920s, was of course Manila Bay by the defense of Bataan and Corridor. So we shifted away from simply defending the island to looking at the Philippine archipelago as a circular, that we have to project the capabilities of the Armed Forces of the Philippines into our exclusive economic zone. So the importance, of course, developing the Navy, developing the Air Force. At this point in time, we don't have the capability to engage the Chinese head-on. So the goal is basically what you call anti-access area denial capabilities. Bringing in the BrahMos missiles and, of course, allowing, of course, and a very important element of the CADSI is, of course, the alliance system. We can discuss this. We can have a whole time on how we basically have to look at CADSI. But I think this is the most important contribution of this administration. Of course, the challenge began with the term of President Aquino, the need to modernize the armed forces, the arbitral tribunal ruling, even the Duterte administration, despite its appeasement policy at the end. 3 years into its term, it realized that whether you appease or challenge China, you get the same result, and that's subjugation. So, and of course, what is happening right now is a culmination of the realization that at the end of the day, whatever you do to China, you apply diplomacy, you will only get one result. You have a code of conduct, you have a bilateral consultation. At the end of the day, China's goal is, as Ray Collins said, Sun Tzu's notion is to win without actually fighting. But the essence there is not just simply winning, the goal there is subjugation.
All right. Admiral Ong, please. Thank you, Professor Rene.
3 points. Number one, there is a nexus between our geopolitical situation and our domestic stability, and that nexus is sitting in Netherlands. Second, we need to look at both what is affecting the hard power part, which is what we're discussing. There is also the sharp power part, which is the disinformation united front activities. Third, we need to respond full spectrum. We need to defend diplomatically in the public opinion space, in the West Philippine Sea, as well as in the economic battlefield. So unless we look at these four areas of concern, we might be majoring on the minor and doing the wrong things right. Okay.
I'll indulge you a bit, dear panelists. I'll wear a Beijing-made hat, if I may. Okay. So
I think I already covered that in my presentation.
You're being labeled as a warmonger, Colonel Ray. But you know, hearing your responses and wearing my Beijing-made hat, I can simply accuse you of escalation, right? I can simply say that it's the Philippines who is escalating all of these tensions. What can you say to those people or to those pronouncements made by some sectors?
First order of the day, we need to break escalation dominance of Beijing. We cannot break escalation dominance if we keep running away. Okay? We need to face the problem head on. Okay? So one example, Typhoon missile. That's a very good escalation dominance breaker. Okay?
They raise a lot over this deployment of the Typhoon and the Nemesis missile system, right? Is that escalation for you guys? Or
you know, from the
simply
end of the
deterrent?
day, every time you challenge China, even we file the diplomatic protest, China will always say it's escalation. So if we fall to the Chinese narrative that everything we do is escalation, if we probably change the guards at the presidential palace, Beijing could accuse us of escalation. So again, this is part of the Chinese narrative. Any action you undertake against the Middle Kingdom is always construed by the Middle Kingdom as escalation. So we have to basically, at a certain point, we have to do what we have to do to challenge China no matter what China would tell us. Again, this, and going back to the statement of Secretary Gibo Chiloro, we should never give China the veto to tell us what to do, especially when it comes to the realm of national security.
Thank you, Professor Rene. You want to add to that, Ray?
I just say, you know, we talk a lot about the idea of a bully, right? So what happens with a schoolyard bully? If the bully comes and takes your lunch money every day, and then one day you show up and you've got 3 of your friends with you, or 3 of your larger friends, and they go, oh, now you're escalating. Well, yeah, right? Because you're taking my lunch money every day, right? So there is a little bit of a cult around the term de-escalation. And if you oversubscribe to the idea that de-escalation is always good, the bully will always take your lunch money.
All right. Thank you for those insightful comments. Dear panelists, now those of you who are interested to ask questions will set around 10 minutes for you to ask your questions during the open forum. I'll now go to my questions for each of the panelists. I'll go first with Colonel Ray. Colonel Ray, you know, you gave an excellent presentation of Chinese disinformation operations, perhaps malign influence, I call it, right? Given what's happening right now and the developments, for example, in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, do you see a version 2 of these types of disinformation attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think to start with, you're not going to see really sloppy plagiarism like I showed you before, because they're going to be able to throw it to ChatGPT and tell, well, make sure it doesn't match that one from the Global Times, right? But yes, I think what you're also going to be able to see, I think in the United States a couple of days ago, they had an incident where Grok, the artificial intelligence agent that comes out of X, began to spew out a whole bunch of like neo-Nazi slogans and things, and they had to go and shut down Grok. And, you know, of course, the question is, where did all that come from? But the idea is the ability to flood the airwaves with whatever you want. I mean, that was sort of a disturbing and a little bit ridiculous example of what can be done through AI. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see now articles and blog posts and X posts and all those things are just going to hit the streets without anybody having to, so they're going to be such a volume of them because they're going to be so easy to make. All you have to do is tell Grok to go ahead, you make you 100 of these an hour and flood the Philippine airwaves with whatever you want.
Totally agree with you, Colonel Ray, that language models are really vulnerable at this point. Let me now shift my question to Professor Charmaine. Professor Charmaine, you mentioned, you proposed a shift, if I'm not mistaken, from maritime security to what you called as blue security. Can you elaborate more on this, and how can you, do you have any suggestions of how to operationalize this?
Sure. I can teach an entire class on how we can shift maritime security
There you go,
to blue
Charmaine.
security. But to answer your question, I think context is very important. The argument is not so much that we leave behind conceptions on maritime security as we currently understand it. The advocacy is really that blue security can complement whatever states are doing in the maritime security domain. Because the argument here is that where we stand in maritime security, we see a lot of tensions that don't seem to have an ending, and we will be caught in this escalation, different levels of escalation. So the suggestion is that if we can understand that there are different facets to maritime security beyond state actors, then we may be able to slowly, incrementally address some of these issues. Operationalizing it would mean beefing up law enforcement, ensuring that there are actors that are in place that can confront these different challenges that don't necessarily focus on only state activities and state actors. So at the end of the day, it's still the state that makes the decision anyway.
Do you see this, Charmaine, as being part of the middle power rise of the Philippines if we make this shift? A bit controversial question, I believe.
Yeah, well, that's another concept that we can unpack on whether or not the Philippines is indeed a middle power, or if we're aspiring to be a middle power. What does it mean to be a middle power? I think that has to do as well with the completion of the modernization of our armed forces and that trajectory.
All right, thank you very much, Charmaine. Now I go to Professor Rene. Sir, you again propose a controversial idea, having an Asian-style NATO. Because you're a controversial person as well, sir.
No.
So, but what challenges do you see, affecting this shift from multilaterals on Asian-style NATO?
I'm not proposing. I basically said it what's happening. So I'm describing something that's evolving. The fact that, number one, of course, the United States is engaging China in a strategic competition. Despite, again, going back to the Trump administration, despite the rhetoric of America first, you see the Trump administration first, of course, reviving the quadrilateral security dialogue. Then, of course, followed by the Biden administration. Then, of course, emergence of minilateral. And, of course, the fact that China has simply scared the hell out of South Korea, the Philippines, Japan, Australia. In the case of Australia, China even sent a flotilla that conducted a naval exercise near the waters between New Zealand and Australia. So if you intimidated them, you make a quarrel out of everyone, expect them to gang against you. So what I basically said, again, I'm basically observing what is already happening. If that will emerge into what I call the Indo-Pacific NATO style, it's happening right now. The fact that, a very good example of this is Japan's offer of providing the Philippines, if that is really the case, of 6 destroyer escorts. So you see what we call, we're not allied with Japan, we're security partners. So you see 2 U.S. allies cooperating with one another. And you also see this in the case of Australia and, of course, Japan, and even South Korea. So what's, my basic point here, this is something that's already emerging. Okay? So I'm not proposing it. This is my observation.
All right. Thank you, sir, for that correction. And once again, excellent points there. Let me now go to Admiral Ong. Sir, theory of victory. You know very well that in the Philippines, we have short political cycles. And perhaps this administration's strong policy may not be carried to the next administration. What do you think are ways to further institutionalize this excellent proposal that you made a while ago?
The foundation of Filipino theory of victory is moving away the center of gravity from the state to the people. That means you have to empower the people to have a better say of what's happening in government. Otherwise, we will just have a cycle of uh, transactional leaders sitting in government. Okay, so that's the basic idea. That's why it needs to have a synergy between state and people. Kung kinapos si state, then the people will have to sort of help it on its merry way back to proper path.
But you know very well, sir, that the state in the Philippines has a lot of, authority and power, right? And if you happen to have a different opinion with the state, then it gets its way, right? What are the possible ways that you mentioned civilianizing the West Philippine Sea? Aside from the examples that you showed us, are there other ways that we can really adopt this whole of society principle?
If we deconstruct the problem at West Philippine Sea in non-military terms, it's about food security and energy security. As Justice Carpio said, we will lose Malampaya in 2027. If you look at the cascade effects of that, eventually it's going to cost jobs, power issues, the economy will be breaking down. So that means this is not a military issue alone. We need to look at it holistically. Food security, because we have lost access to some parts of the West Philippine Sea, we are actually importing fish components from China based on PIDS data. And paano tayo napunta ron sa ganong situation? Okay? So what I'm trying to point out is we need to contextualize the problem beyond the military lens and look at it as a common tao's problem. That way it resonates in the public. That means it puts the public now puts pressure on government to address the problem holistically, not in bite pieces. That's what we're doing now.
Sherman, I'll invite you to add to that because that really sits well with your idea of blue security, if you may, Sherman. Does it, involve really this conception of blue security?
It does definitely, and there are moves within the discipline of international relations to also acknowledge that that the way that states understand international relations are very different in the current situations around the world, especially in light of the circumstances that small and middle powers find themselves in. In the context of the Philippines and the West Philippine Sea, I agree completely with Admiral Ong that in order for ordinary Filipinos to understand the gravity of the situation, it's not just about sovereignty, territoriality, arbitrary lines in the waters anchored in international law. It's also about kitchen table issues and gut issues. So if we are able to reformulate the West Philippine Sea as a food security issue or an energy security issue, it's something that can be more tangible, more palatable, more understandable to ordinary Filipinos.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll open the floor for your questions. We have a few hands raised. Can we request a mic? Kindly introduce yourself, sir, and state your question. If you want a general question addressed to the panel, just say so. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sirs. I'm Captain Martinez of the Philippine Navy. In light of the 9th anniversary of the Philippines' landmark arbitral victory at The Hague, what strategic measure or measures you would recommend the Philippines to pursue at the national, regional, and global levels to reinforce collective resolve in upholding not only the Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights, but more critically, the integrity of the global maritime commons in the South China Sea, particularly through strengthened legal, diplomatic, and security cooperation with like-minded nations, partners, and stakeholders who are committed to free, open, and rules-based maritime domain. That's all, sir.
All right, thank you, Captain. Anyone who would like to answer that? That's quite a lot, yeah.
The arbitral ruling provides us a sense of convening power. Okay. And the result of that is actually this morning when we have different excellencies at this stage, different ambassadors coming in, who pledged their support because of the arbitral ruling. They come in with the help. The question is, ano yung gagawin nyo sa tulong nila? Kasi it's an issue of absorptive capacity. Okay? Absorptive capacity, what I observe is, they have been helping us, but are we absorbing the help and transforming the help to something concrete? Okay. Maybe in one or two, maybe yes, but we need to address it holistically. Okay. So the point of my presentation earlier is modernization if modernization is not strategy driven, then it's going nowhere. Okay. We cannot modernize because we just have a laundry list. Okay. There must be a method to the madness why we are buying equipment or not buying equipment at all. Okay. That's why I propounded there must be at least two strategies behind it. Actually, the denial strategy, we've been using that since 2016. So nothing new for the Navy. We adopted that. The next problem is what strategy do we have in case of conflict? Kasi our strategy is in quote-unquote peacetime scenario. Okay? So unless we have that crisis strategy, because that crisis strategy will determine the level of lethality that the armed forces needs to work on to be able to actually make to provide the appropriate battle space effect when we do have conflict. Okay.
I can add at the regional level, something that we can anticipate and look forward to is that for next year, the Philippines will be chair of ASEAN, and hopefully this time around we'll be able to really advocate for the 2016 Arbitration Award, something that we were not able to do in the last time that we were chair of the organization.
Yeah, if I could so one of the things I think is really important for the Philippines, and I've been talking about this since late last year, is to frame the West Philippine Sea issue with the understanding that the way to think of it is essentially an occupation. The West Philippine Sea is under a maritime occupation. And the reason that framing is helpful is how do occupations end? So if you have an imperialist occupation, they end when the colonial power, when the imperialist power basically gets tired. When it wears out, when it starts asking itself, why am I still here? So let's look at India, for example, under the British Empire. That was essentially a nonviolent resistance movement that overcame the occupation through great patience and by rallying popular support. That's why, frankly, organizations like Atinito are so important, because ultimately what you have to do is have the people behind you for the long struggle.
Thank you for that. Dr. De Castro, do you want to add to that? All right. Thank you, sir. We have another question, I guess. Yeah. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Jaime Naval from the Political Science Department. I listened intently to the presentations of our different speakers. Since this morning, it's nice to be encouraged or cheered by people who we call like-minded. We are inspired by the moral support, aside from the material help that these countries who are like-minded extend to us. But interestingly, as we're celebrating the 9th year, and we're turning a decade by next year, apparently we're in Southeast Asia, and we don't hear so much the cheering of our very own regional friends. Are they not as like-minded as the others outside our region? I'm not trying to play a fiscalizer wearing a Chinese hat like you propose, but maybe to stir up some more thinking. What else can we still do, or what else have we not done to rally the support or the enlist demonstrable, concrete, solid expressions and help maybe from our neighboring countries? Because it's so easy to be cheered by people from outside, but apparently in this part of the world, nobody cheers for the man from Nazareth, for good can come from Nazareth. Or the other spin-off would be they're keeping their cards close to their hearts. But we know, of course, that there's a symmetry of support for the Philippines in view of certain practical national interests or geopolitical considerations. Cambodia would not cheer for us openly, neither would Laos, which is very indebted to China, and not even Myanmar, which is indebted as well, together with military assistance from Beijing. But what else can we do? If only to push us to maybe, hopefully, by the time we celebrate the 10th year, we would have not only the ambassador from Vietnam being invited to speak, but maybe even more our friends, the very own ambassadors they have in our country, just to tease off this discussion. And thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Is this the price that we have to pay as
Okay,
an
address,
emerging
yes.
middle power?
Well, of course, we can do everything. We can use diplomacy, public diplomacy. But of course, at the end of the day, whether that state would support us or not depends primarily on national interests. You know, from their perspective, especially when you talk about Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, they're continental countries that are close to China. So I don't think it's in their national interest to antagonize China. Well, some other Southeast Asian countries, of course, Vietnam. Again, I would like this literature regarding hedging. They would rather hedge. They would rather sit on the fence, try to extract something, economic goodies from China, than, of course, try to have security relations with the US. So that's a reality we face. Southeast Asian countries do not operate on the basis, of course, all countries do not operate primarily on principles. They operate on the simple basis of national interest. So again, this is a reality we face. From their perspective, it's not in their national interest to get involved with the South China Sea issue. Again, in the case of the Philippines, it's a matter of geography. We are in the direct path of Chinese maritime expansion. And of course, we have a treaty ally and security partners who assist us in challenging China. But for the rest of Southeast Asian countries, you know, for Thailand for that matter, why should we antagonize our most important trading partner? That's unfortunately the reality we face. The world still operates on the basis of national interests.
Let me just jump on that. With all respect to Secretary Lazaro, there will never be an ASEAN-China code of conduct. I'm sorry to tell you. You're not going to get Laos to care, right? You're not going to get Timor-Leste, now they're coming on to care. It's just not in their national interest. So the Philippines is going to have to be the backbone for ASEAN. It's going to be hard because a lot of that structure is going to sag around you, but that's going to be the role the Philippines plays in ASEAN. But you have all of these other, you saw all the ambassadors, all of these other partners that you have with you. And so what you will hear as part of the messaging is, well, why are we doing this? Because ASEAN isn't with us, so we should maybe just be more like them. Well, okay, right, if you want to give away your lunch money, you can give away your lunch money. They haven't had to give away as much lunch money as you yet, but they will, right? So, I get it, we all have to sort of pay lip service to the code of conduct. But not in my lifetime. I mean, I can dream, but not in my lifetime.
Thank you for that optimism, Ray.
That's why you bring me, right?
It reminds me of the song All By Myself. So we'll be singing that probably in the next couple of years.
My Way. Yeah, Frank Sinatra's My Way.
Yeah. Charmaine or Admiral Ong, do you want to add to that?
I agree with my fellow panelists that the situation is rather sticky for other Southeast Asian states, that they cannot explicitly give out such support to the Philippines, considering their bilateral relationship with China. But despite that, all is not lost because there are sub-state elements that we can still reach out to, such as Track 2 networks, fellow think tanks, fellow academics, the civil society. These are actors that we can tap. And if we are able to reach out to them, we will realize that we're all actually facing the same kinds of issues. So this is, again, I bring back, blue security can complement our understandings of maritime security.
Excellent point.
Charmaine's the glass half full kind of person.
Yeah. Excellent point, Charmaine. Admiral Ong, please.
Diplomacy is not my forte, but just the same. Maybe whatever we're doing on the diplomatic front maybe is not enough. Maybe you can do some more. Siguro, leveling of expectation, we should not try to aim for trying to convert the other ASEAN capitals to our way of thinking. We accept that they operate on their own national interests, but just the same, we should not stop there. We still need to engage them. Even if we don't convince them, at least the channels are open. Okay? And they are able to freely come back to us and say, we do not like what you're doing. Okay, what are the issues you have against us with respect to that? But at least there's an open channel.
Yeah, good points, Admiral Ong. So we have, again, do you have a follow-up, sir? Do we have other hands raised? Okay, we'll take probably the follow-up first and then the last two questions. Sir, do you have a follow-up for that?
First time, Thank you. It's one thing for us. It's difficult to. I'm not after converting our ASEAN colleagues, but it's not always the case. I agree with Professor De Caso on the national interest, but we may have to transcend or even go to some creative ways to go around that. But I don't want to belabor the point. The point, however, I think we would have to also look at the mirror more clearly, not just the mirror through which we look at our colleagues or counterparts, but at ourselves. For example, the idea of a messaging that is constant and credible is very important. 2016, as the arbitral ruling was announced, we just had a new government. And right away, we had the pivot. Then BBM came about, and we have a different pivot, or a transformation, if you may call that. The message that the world is getting is, ano bang gusto ng mga Pilipino talaga? So, even in conferences that most of us will be attending here and elsewhere, in closed sessions, we cannot really understand what you're saying. What if in the next election you have someone who repivots to a different hegemon? That's the wonder of our democracy. But then, in the paper that I wrote comparing the East China Sea and the South China Sea, one of the conclusions that I made was, and I had to somehow massage it a bit, I have to admit, because it was published during the time of Duterte. What if the very threat to your national security, to our national security, is the one who's supposed to protect our national security? So in the same way, whoever will become president, the premise is he or she will advance the national interest. But I think I agree with Admiral Jude Ong. It has to go beyond the state apparatus. The civilians, the civil society, the people at the grassroots would have to have a larger say. The ultimate decision on what we do with the West Philippine Sea is too delicate and too important to be left behind to government alone. I'm not saying government is irrelevant, but I think all the more we have to organically include the rest of our society, making it really a whole of country approach, not just lip service. And with that, then whatever this democracy would bring us to, I think it is more valid that it's been decided not just by the incumbent regime, but for the rest of the sectors in our society.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you want to briefly respond to that, Sir Rene, or? All right, thank you, sir. We'll take one more question. I see, several hands raised. The young lady raised her hand first. So can you give the mic over to this?
Good afternoon. I'm Rika Faith Oded from the Office for Defense Technology Research and Industry Development at the Department of National Defense. First of all, I want to say my regards to Dr. Ana, Dr. Willoughby, and Dr. De Castro. I was once your student. I'm an international studies graduate
Kaya
from
pala.
DELSA.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So my question is, how can the Philippines make use of the ninth arbitral ruling in building stronger diplomatic alliances with non-claimant states, particularly in garnering global support in the international arena?
To whom do you want to direct the question?
It's a general question.
General question. Who among you can answer that?
It's a LaSalle question, though.
Your teacher will answer your question.
All right. So for the Philippines, we can build or leverage the arbitration award with non-claimant states. I think our anchor is really that we are trying to defend the rules-based order. We will need to reiterate and re-emphasize the importance and the significance of international law. So whether or not one is a claimant in the South China Sea, it's in everybody's interest to continue defending the rules-based international order and follow international law.
All right, thank you, Charmaine. We have one more question. We can entertain one more question. Sorry, guys, but we have the gentleman over here who has the floor. Sorry, dear. Okay.
Yes po, MP Albaida po, Vice Mayor, Municipality of Kalayaan. And my colleagues from Japan, Sir Ong and Ma'am Charmaine. Well, I was quite bothered about, we are all in dilemma. What will happen next after the Marcos administration, right? According to the surveys presented to us by Professor Manhit, though 7 out of 10 Filipinos are into the clout of the West Philippine Sea, there's something that is that is very striking, and that there is somewhat a forming regionalism within the country. And it's very disturbing. How can we, in the West Philippine Sea, the frontliners in the West Philippine Sea, our great constituents of the Municipality of Kalayaan, could have an ally, a Filipino allies, if people far from the West Philippine Sea cannot digest the essence or the relevance of the West Philippine Sea? Could, from the academe, make a paper of a single roadmap of making a story of a West Philippine Sea, not skyrocketing science, but something that is directly affecting the lives and livelihood of every Filipino people, whether it is facing the West Philippine Sea or whether it is facing the Philippine Rise, whether you're from Isabela, in General Santos, and elsewhere from this country. Maraming salamat po.
All right, who among you, our panelists, would like to answer that?
I'll try my best. Basically, again, it involves, I'll rely on the framework developed by Benedict Anderson, notion of imagined community. We have to imagine ourselves as an archipelagic nation. And we focus our destiny, our wealth, our very essence as a nation is primarily archipelagic. So that's the starting point. Something we have to develop consciousness. And of course, the fact that our existence as an archipelagic nation is threatened by Chinese maritime expansion. So whether you're in Mindanao, whether in your Palawan, or whether you're in Quezon, we're part of an archipelagic nation. It's a threat to our nation. So my starting point is, again, we go back to the very essence of what makes us Filipinos. And it's, of course, the notion of being an archipelagic nation and, of course, a maritime state. So the starting point again. I think this will involve education. This involves continuous discourse. Of course, it will be challenging if you'll have suddenly a change in government. But interestingly, despite what we see during the last 6 years, after efforts to appease China, try to come out with something innovative, at the end of the day, they, even the former President Rodrigo Duterte realized that whether you appease or challenge China, China's goal is simply to control the whole 90% of the South China Sea. Thus, it constitutes a threat to our very essence as an archipelagic nation. So my answer is, again, being an academic, I go back to the very essence. We have to imagine it as an archipelagic nation.
You want to add to that, sir?
I will approach it from an information operations lens. I'll ask Professor Dindo to maybe do a survey on Mindanao and look at what are the sentiments there. and look for the vulnerability. Then I'll craft the appropriate messaging ikakabit natin sa West Philippine Sea that would actually resonate with that specific region.
I'll just add to what Admiral Ong said. When I share the data, actually only 7% is against us asserting. So, and what bothers me is the rise of undecided, especially in Mindanao. And I'll be crossing certain data for this that we are tracking. This is due to the disinformation. And the disinformation is based on a group of bloggers that some were quoted by Colonel Ray Powell. The same bloggers mouth out the same lines as China. Worse was, we saw in March 11, do you remember what happened in March 11? The same bloggers simply shifted to the Duterte line. That let's bring home Tatay Digong. So that's how Mindanao, I believe, got influence. Because we have reached 80 plus 80% already, even 89 on the first month of President Marcos. June 30, 2022, we reached 89%. But with limited undecided. So you know that there are powers, maybe beyond us, conniving with Filipino groups here that is pushing this narrative, creating doubt on the Filipino people. But me, I'm not concerned. Why? Because I believe the Filipinos will not allow a president to be elected who is pro-China. And in 2028, Strat-Base will be there to name that candidate. And we are ready to name that. Because in 2016, when nobody wanted to talk about this, we gathered people to talk about this. So that is our commitment. And I hope political groups, that's why I said whole of society. But we need to name. No, we need to name. And we will start naming. That's why in a statement we did last week, is it a choice between China and US? A certain public official said that. No? I don't know if you know her. But for me, it's not a choice. It's a choice about Filipino national interest. And that national interest, we should stand up. No? We are archipelagic nations. Our seas are important. The law is behind us. So why follow the narrative of China? It's a choice between China and the US. It's a choice for the Filipino people.
All right, thank you, Sir Dindo, for that. I guess that will be the last word for this panel. I'm sorry, dear, but we're running out of time. Okay, please join me in giving a round of applause to our excellent panel. Thank you very much, sirs and ma'am, for your excellent insights. We will have our picture take.
All right. Yes, may I request the panel to stay on stage, please, and Professor Manhit to join the photo opportunity, please. All right, let's give another round of applause to our speakers and moderator, Colonel Ray Powell, Dr. Charmaine Willoughby, Dr. Renato De Castro, Admiral Romel Ong, and Dr. Sherwin Ona. And that concludes our conference for today. Thank you very much again to all of our speakers and to everyone who joined us here in the venue. And also to those who watched us on Facebook Live and via Zoom. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope to see you all again, perhaps here on our 10th year anniversary of the Arbitral victory next year. Once again, I'm Joyce Reyes and hope you all have a good rest of the day.